sometimes spiritual concepts can seem a little woo-woo and also a bit esoteric. Like it's only something that saints and sages can access. And what I want you to know is that it isn't that way. This information is available to all. But the way in which it's delivered to you is very important because that will determine whether you actually believe that it's something you can achieve for yourself or whether it's just something that just seems very out there, not available to you. And that's why having a good teacher is really important. And that's why I've invited my next guest, Lincoln Gergar. Lincoln has been instrumental in helping me access the multi-dimensional layers of myself, the mental body, the emotional body, and the physical body. Understand the creative process, that we're all creators, and how we're creating is determined by who we know ourselves as. When we identify as just the human body, then we're going to create from a limited perspective. But when we understand ourselves to be creators and eternal beings, then we can create with an unlimited perspective. And how and who we know ourselves as will determine how the physical world responds to us. Because we're actually creating it. And the physical world is not just out there, it's actually inside of us because we're bodies of consciousness. Lincoln has a channel on YouTube called Channel Higher Self. And that's what he does. He teaches people how to channel their higher self consciousness. We are multidimensional beings and we all have access to this higher self state. It's just a different state of being than maybe you're used to, but you definitely are accessing it at times. Why would you want to access this? Because it allows you to become more of who you really are, so that you're not just working from this limited perspective. And Lincoln is just such a skilled teacher. I started working with him in 2020, right when COVID hit. He started what he calls the Higher Self Inner Circle. And it's a group of people, it's over 100 people now from all over the globe, and we meet once a week on Sunday from 8 to 11 Eastern or Pacific time. And he does a meditation, he does a channel teaching, and then he also does Q&A. And then the idea is that you do the meditation at least once a day, because really it's, again, how we know ourselves is how we're going to create our reality. And so the more we can re-educate our ego structure or the human psyche, our memory-based conditioning, the more we can re-educate that, the more powerful creators we can become. And this is what he teaches. His YouTube channel, again, he has over 1,000 videos on his YouTube channel. It has over 5 million views. He teaches in-person workshops as well as one-on-one private sessions. The workshops he's done in over 13 countries, spanning 5 continents. And he really is a masterful teacher. And that's why I invited him on to share with you, but also to ask him some clarifying questions for a book that I intend to write called Homo Spiritus. Because when we start really identifying as that eternal being that we are, that will change everything. It's going to change our health. It's going to change how we experience the world, because we'll start to identify as the creators that we are. Now, that might seem very far off for some of you, but the reason I'm doing this is because I want you to know that it's not. And it gets fun once you can start identifying with your true self, your true nature. You become more of yourself. You just are not limited by the ideas that you've been conditioned with. So you become more powerful at manifesting or creating the life that you truly. If you like what you're hearing, if you want to learn more, please like and subscribe so I can bring more content to you. Leave questions and comments in the comment section so I can see what you're interested in. I can answer any questions that you have about the content, because it doesn't have to be so complex. It's very simple. The structure of the universe is actually quite simple. And Thomas Campbell, the author of My Big Toe, My Big Theory of Everything, said, when we finally understand the universe, we'll think, oh my God, how could we have been so stupid? It's so simple. And it really is. And that's why That's my passion, is to deliver this complex information, break it down for you so that you can utilize it. Because when you understand the rules of the game and how to play the game, it becomes much more fun. Okay, so let me explain why I wanted to speak with you. And that is, I decided, I guess, kind of the development of this idea of writing this book happened a couple of years ago, I think. And it was very small little idea that would come to mind every time I'd speak to someone, and I would see that their understanding of reality was from a limited perspective, which we all start out that way because that's the design of this reality. And I was like, I would always have this idea like, oh, I wish they would, if they just knew this, but it was impossible to explain all this information in just a short conversation. And so this idea started developing in my mind that I should write this book. And I had that experience in 2018 where I was, I had a Kundalini rising experience, and I didn't know what it was, but I felt like a light being. And it was the most magnificent feeling that you could ever imagine. It was like every part of me was like the light of the sun, and it was just ecstatic bliss, pure ecstatic bliss. And I was like, oh my God, is this how we're supposed to feel? Like, it was just so exciting. And I couldn't find anyone who knew what that was. And no one could explain to me what had happened to me. And after that evening, that night, my brain, like the energy in my brain was just going bzzz, it was buzzing. But I knew enough at that point to not let it bother me, just to like relax into it. The energy had an intelligence, and just to like let it flow. And so I didn't sleep that whole night. And then the next day I finally fell asleep, but my body felt very different after that. It felt very light. I could take in more air than ever. I mean, I could just go, and I would just keep going and going and going. And I could feel everything in the universe just bouncing. Like the sidewalk was bouncing, the air was more alive, the trees were bouncing, everything was vibrating. And I was like, what is this? Like, I didn't understand, and no one could explain it to me. And I think that was by design, because I had to go through the journey, the journey of discovering what that was. And so that's what I've done that's happened the end of 2018. And that's what I've done ever since. And part of that was finding your work. And I had knowledge from Vedanta. I had a really good Vedanta teacher. And I feel really blessed because I basically had Vedanta and then you. And I had the Seth books. I had the Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East. I had some of Paramahansa Yogananda's information. And I had the energy and the awakening of my subtle body, awakening to my subtle body in Kundalini yoga. But there's not a lot of wisdom in Kundalini yoga. But the practices were really good for helping me get in touch or feeling my subtle energy body. And so I had all of this information, but it wasn't until I started working with you that I could actually make sense of it and put it all together, like really understand the universe and what this reality is. And during all of the work that I've done with you, so basically in 2020, when everything shut down, you started the Higher Self Inner Circle. And it was like perfect timing, because it was like we were in lockdown. I was like, this is so perfect. I'm going to do this twice a day. I did all the meditations twice a day. I listened to the teachings almost every day. And then the Q&A, not every day, but I listened to a lot. So I basically, isolated myself and just went deep. And it really showed me, having the knowledge that I had. And then yours was really application of that, right? And like experiencing my inner world, which then showed me a lot about how the outer world worked. So I had these concepts before, but not the application of those concepts, not the experience of those concepts. And so that's what was really remarkable about working with you. And and I know you know this, that it's more experiential with you. And I think it's really taking scientists 100 years to figure out what's going on, because a lot of them don't go in. You have to go inward in order to understand the reality. And I think, and the few that I've met, or not met, but, been studying their work, that actually understand what's going on, they do spend a lot of time in meditation. So there are some questions that I want to ask you to kind of bring clarity to things. And, the title of the book, I think now it could be something different when it actually comes out, but it's Homo Spiritus, because that night when I experienced myself as a light being, still in physical form, but as I could feel the light, I feel like that's where we're going, and now that I can shift between the different states of consciousness pretty easily, because of the work with you, I can bring myself to that point again where it's not quite like that, but it's very close. And I think just with some more purification of some belief systems and learning how to stay aware of myself as the awareness, I'll be able to experience that more and more. And I'm also seeing that I'm getting into this, when I can shift into the God conscious state, which I'll ask you to define in just a moment. I can see that the physical world is not so real. And actually, that night before I actually felt myself as a light being, that's exactly what spawned it. Was I was laying down, getting ready to lay down next to my daughter and read a book. And as I went to lay down, I noticed, like, I felt lightheaded, and I noticed that everything was moving. I looked up, I sat up, and everything was kind of vibrating and suspended in space. All the walls, the space itself, and the material objects in the room. And I sat up and I was like, am I dizzy? But you don't get dizzy sitting down, you get dizzy standing up. And so I thought, what is going on here? Like, I was looking around and everything, it was like, when a light in a movie projector is shining onto the film, the frame, and then that image is then being projected onto the canvas, right? Or to the movie screen. And if you look up, you could see that the image suspended in space, right? Well, that's what I was seeing. I was seeing the world suspended in space. And my body felt very, very light, very weightless. And I stood up and I thought, I felt fine, but this was very empty. It felt like space. Inside my head felt like space. And I looked at my arms and they felt like space. I felt like at one with the room, with the space around me. And I could see the arms, but they didn't feel like there was this definite, defined body compared to the space. It felt at one with the space. And I guess the first thought I had was, am I having a stroke? Because I didn't understand what was happening, but there was absolutely no pain. I felt weightless. And I started to walk towards the room where my partner was, because I thought, am I having a stroke? And then because I felt so not in my body, I felt like the space. I kind of reached for the walls to support me, but I didn't really need it. But my hand went through the wall. So everything, it wasn't as real as we think it is. And I think it's our level, our state of consciousness that's determining this. But I didn't have a conscious control over that. My human self, Kat, didn't consciously create that. So there was another part of me, I believe, that created that. And I believe we can wake up to this part of us. And that's kind of the information I'd like to talk to you about, and as well as, that state of feeling like a light body, and just some of the information that I've experienced from you so far. So I just like to get more clarity around that, and then also, use this to share with others. So Huh?
Great stories. I loved hearing about your life and your journey. I mean, I think it's fantastic that like when we meet each other in that space, because most of us were filling our head with concepts all the time and we're trying to place it, but it's different when you hear someone's journey and you
Hmm.
hear the experiences they've had because it it communicates in a different way. It's more like real, it's more grounded, but it's also special.
Hmm.
In some way, it validates all of our own journeys, when we listen to it. But then it also shows us, another reality, which then expands our understanding in a good way.
Yeah. And I think that's what we're all here to do, right? Is just to, we're all God having an experience of God and from different perspectives. And and I think that's the way in which the universe is expanding. It's
Yeah, definitely.
us coming together, having this conversation, and then the universe expands in that way. And
Mhm.
it's also really interesting because this, when I went to start researching, because I thought, okay, I'm going to write this book, but who's going to believe me? Right? I haven't met anyone else who felt like a light being. I haven't met I get I have an idea because of what I've experienced by going inward with your guidance of what how reality works, but who's going to believe me, right? It's just me talking about it. So then I was like, oh, well, I have to find the research. I have to find the science. And I wasn't really sure that it was there yet, but it is. And it's not that there's any one particular scientist that has an idea of everything about reality, but there's certain scientists that have pieces of it, and then together, bringing that together, I can see the bigger. It all creates the big picture of what's really
Yeah,
happening.
yeah. It's interesting when you were talking about the scientists kind of moving in the last 100 years to explore spirituality and the non-physical and these states of being light. What came to mind was, a lot of these scientists, you're right, they don't have non-physical experiences. And that's like a person entering in a dark room, which there's no lights and you can't see anything. And then they're asked to try to measure it and like draw out what it looks like.
Yeah.
So we're trying to create devices to measure the non-physical, but we don't have experiences of the non-physical. It's like, trying to draw something in the dark you can't see.
Mhm.
So I think the challenge is, like you said, can we do the inner work and realize we're the greatest machinery and then invest in ourselves? And then as we start having experiences, then we can start developing the tools in accurate ways.
Right.
It's like Jonathan, who hooked me up to the brain machine
Yeah.
and all that. So after my initial meeting where they measured all my frequencies, Jonathan liked that I could describe to him what I was experiencing internally when his computer was showing all these numbers and bars and graphs externally. So I came back a few weeks later and he put on me these glasses that have flashing lights. And then the machinery they were hooked up to can change the frequency of the flashing lights to change your brain state. And so I was like, okay, cool. I'll just tell you what's going on. So when he was going through the different frequencies and we moved in 10 hertz increments, I was able to explain to him what I was perceiving. And different hertz frequencies vibrated different parts of my energy body and created like very subtle emotional states. So I could feel how the emotion of that frequency that the machine was creating, because I was just being like awareness and just watching it, I could feel that it was like external to my own will. I wasn't creating it. So when that happens, like usually when I'm feeling another person's energy, it feels like it's on the periphery of my energy body because something external to myself is creating that frequency, but that frequency is still in my experience, so I can perceive it. So it felt like this machine was putting different feelings in me or vibrating different locations of my energy body. And then I was able to explain to him where it was happening, what I was feeling, and what I was sensing. So like we went into the 40 hertz range, which is supposed to be like the gamma range, the channeling range, and I'm feeling it and I'm explaining to him what that's doing for me. And I'm like, yeah, like I understand it makes you happy, but that's just like a low level. I said, let's go up higher. So we went to 50, we went to 60, and we kept going higher and as far as the machine could go. And as we went into higher frequencies, it actually activated different things. And the way I would explain it is the higher you go up in these frequencies, the more you enter into higher vibrational states of bliss and happiness.
Mhm.
And that helped answer the question that we discovered when I had my brain measured. My brain was vibrating at around 52 hertz when I was remote viewing and seeing these spiritual dimensions and channeling. And that was different than what everyone else was saying is no, 40 hertz is the magic number. So I
Mm-hmm.
got to experience 40 hertz on the machine. I'm like, no, that's not nearly as blissful as 50 hertz, and 60 hertz feels even more away from the physical reality. Like I felt like I was floating up and leaving my body because the energy was very high above my head in the chakra system. So if I go into like 60 hertz, like I'm having difficulty staying in my body and communicating. And I feel this like spiritual vibration and this uplifting feeling, like I'm rising out. So it was fascinating that, I think everybody, when we develop that skill of being able to sense in the non-physical, we then can validate these different scientific ideas we have. And better yet, we can start to really develop the machinery and the equipment that can measure these frequencies and reproduce these frequencies. Because now we can validate it from our own senses, because ultimately that's what science is. It's the repeated creation of something. So we validate that this is fact, but
Mm-hmm.
we're the ones who validate because we're perceiving it.
Yeah. Um, it's interesting. So were you trying to reach up, or were you
Oh,
just like raising the vibration within yourself, and that was causing you to go out?
I wasn't doing anything. I was just pure witness because
But
I
when you,
wanted,
but you said you were like at 40 hertz, and you were saying, oh, that's not
I was
enough.
just,
So
yeah, I was just witnessing it. So I know how it feels when I go in these different states of vibration, we'll call them, and they feel different emotionally and they feel like they're happening in a different part of my arc field. But when I experience it, it's very much from the center of myself, from the spiritual heart area, the energy's being created, and then it expands myself into that. When I had the glasses on, I just felt it being created as like an orb out in space. And so it's like, okay, like I feel the 40 hertz vibration. Like actually, 40 hertz was still in my third eye. So it was still very much a human vibration. And it felt like a very soft state of happiness. So when this sunglasses were on and they were vibrating my brain at 40 hertz, I was just explaining what I was noticing because I had no expectation. I never studied the science other than, the few things Jonathan told me or someone else told me in conversation. And so I was trying to explain what the sunglasses do. I wasn't trying to create it. And it felt like it was just put into my auric field or put into my field of perception. And when that 40 hertz was going on, it felt like no matter what anybody said to me, I would have a happy response. It felt like I was like always happy. Like as soon as I wanted to talk, I started smiling. And it was a very gentle feeling, different than when I create it. When we create our own emotions, they're so much stronger. When emotion comes into us, it's more like being empathic and it's a weaker experience of feeling. So I felt the machine was like putting happiness into me, and I just kind of allowed myself to feel what that was. And because I allowed myself to become one with the machine's frequency, I noticed how it started changing me.
okay. But
Yeah.
when you wanted to go higher to the 50 or whatever,
Yeah.
you
I had
create.
no, with the machine, we could dial the machine up.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, yeah. When
Oh,
I was,
okay.
yeah, I think the area of confusion, when I was measured like a month or two earlier, there was no machine putting me in any frequencies. I was just channeling, and then his computer was measuring the frequencies I was producing.
Okay.
So the readout on that the brain scientists looked at and measured said I was predominantly at a 52 hertz spike. So that was my gamma spike was about 52 hertz. And the scientists didn't know why that was happening because they say when in all of our studies we've seen 40 hertz. And that's usually what these, people are resonating at when they're doing loving kindness meditations and things like that. And I had no idea either. I'm like, I don't know why it's showing up. You're the scientist.
Yeah,
This
you
is
tell me.
your field of expertise. I'm just the guinea pig.
Yeah.
So when we did the glasses, it was cool because for me, it was really neat because I was able then to understand, oh, okay, like this vibration is 40 hertz, this vibrations, it allowed me to really be able to perceive into like to quantify my own emotional experiences or the own vibrational experiences that I was having.
Hmm. The video is paused, but I could hear you still. Can you hear me still? shoot.
Yeah, sometimes there we
Okay.
go. Yeah, sometimes it just drops off in the middle of the day for no reason other than maybe all the snowbirds are online at the same time.
Yeah, it's pretty much retirement down there, right?
Yeah, yeah, there's some families in that, but yeah, I'd say the great majority, maybe 70% of people are, seasonal. They come down in the winter time when it's nice here and then go back north during the summer.
Yeah. I think we heard most of what you said. So,
Yeah. Okay. So what was interesting for me is I was able to feel what these different frequencies meant to me. Like as I connected with the frequency, something happened inside my field. It's like if someone would show you a color and then measure what happens in your emotional perception. It's like,
yeah.
okay, when I'm feeling red, I feel angry, or when I feel blue, I feel intellectual, and just generic descriptions, of course. So I was shown these different frequencies, and I could explain what was going on inside of me.
Mhm.
Where I think that's valuable because then we can essentially build a map of all these different frequencies and then develop our different technological machinery better. If we use these brain caps that kind of put you in a meditative state, and if someone can say what's going on, I think that's better than just someone saying this is the number you want,
Right.
because we don't necessarily know. Like if everyone's creating 40 hertz, people assume, well, that's the frequency of love. And it's like, well, like if we really want to map it out, then let's look more into it than that. I think we're quick to like draw conclusions and make generalizations and say this is the best or this is the right way, instead of really just being open-minded and trying to get all the information we can first before we draw conclusions. And then we'll feel or we'll discover, I believe, that emotions are more like a rainbow where the colors just blend into each other. And
Mhm.
it's not like this is love, this is hate, this is peace, this is jealousy. It's more a frequency band in which everything kind of blends together.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, that's actually one of the things I kind of have a question about, but we'll wait for that. I want to start first with, um, one of the things that you say in all your videos in the beginning is you are God. And at first, I didn't have a strong reaction to it because fortunately for me, I didn't have a strong, at the time that I started working with you, I didn't have a strong denial of this word God. I think we need to revive the word, resurrect the word, because I think it's a very powerful word, especially when you understand what God is. But it's something that you say at the beginning of every single video. And I want to understand how you discovered that for yourself and what that means to you.
Mhm. Um, I always knew it. Ever since I was a little kid, like I was raised Catholic, and so I'm taking, catechism class and learning about the Bible and everything I'm supposed to understand as a Catholic. And it always just made sense to me that everything is God. I'm sure my parents had a hand in offering that understanding, but I can't remember whenever I was sat down and explained it. But when the teachers, in the catechism class would say that God is everywhere or God is the creator, it just made sense to me that it has to be everything. Now, when I say I am God, it doesn't mean in this human experience that I'm experiencing all of myself. Because in my understanding, if I'm experiencing the fullness of God that I am, then I'm perceiving everything all at the same time.
Mhm.
And obviously, in our human experience, we're filtering out, 99.99 probably to eternity percent of reality. And we're taking just this really, really small fraction of reality. And even my personality is just a fraction of the possibilities of understanding as a human being and emotion as a human being, in addition to the body and the environment I'm in. So for me, we're all God consciousness, and logically, it just makes sense. Experientially, it makes sense. For me, it's an undeniable fact that we're all God. And if someone says we're not God, the way I interpret it is you're just not understanding who you are.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
someone saying like, I'm not a human being.
Mhm.
And it's like, no, well, you have a human body, and they're, no, they're denying it or they can't perceive it. It makes sense that this is what we call a human body. This is the word we use to be human. And if you have the features of it, you have the human body. You might not accept it, you might not understand it, but there's a reality to that's what's existing right now. So for everybody, you're God. And you could think, I'm not God. God doesn't love me. God rejected me. But in my experience, they don't really have a fully developed understanding of what that word even means.
Mm-hmm.
But when we look at religions and we look at different cultures, that word God, I feel, is the most powerful word in the human language in any culture. And it's also the most difficult to define, and it's the most triggering word. It has the most emotional potency to it because we've attached everything else to just what the word God means.
Mm-hmm. Oh no.
So when we look at the definition of God, it's something that exists everywhere. Yeah. Okay. When we look at the word God, we realize it's like all knowing, all powerful, all creative, all aware. Some would even call it all loving. So basically, it's the omnis. And so if you really look into that terminology, it means that there can never be anywhere or anything or any experience, any idea that is not God. If we look at like what God, the word is used to describe, it encompasses everything. And that's how it's always been known historically. But unfortunately, a lot of people, as we see in the modern day world, they don't really think for themselves, or they don't really put together the pieces of like science or definitions or logic and reason. And they fill in the blanks with their own assumptions or their own limited ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think with historically, God wants you to kill somebody else because, they're not of the same religion we are, or their skin looks different than us. It's like, well, if you understand what God is, you would realize that God would never like instruct you to kill someone in the same way God would never instruct you to create an experience. Because you are God and God is the all that is, and God is not a separate thing from us. God is the complete experience of all that we are. We're just only experiencing a very tiny percentage of it. So as I look back at history, and I studied all the religions, I have a degree in religion. I noticed that like religion and like true spiritual, we call spirituality right now, like the beliefs of God and self and soul and all of that, that's been mixed into politics. It's been mixed into government and the rule of societies. It's been mixed into finance. It's been mixed into ownership of property and physical objects. So people have essentially used religion and spirituality as a way to do other human things. And so they'll threaten you, well, God will kill you, or God will punish you and put you in hell, or God will just unmake your reality and destroy you forever. And these are all oftentimes threats made for political agendas, for personal agendas, some sort of human experience of desire. So if we can get past all the modification of actually what the word God means, we see it's pretty pure and basic. And then if you just follow that logical argument to the end, you'll realize that everything has to be God.
So I can understand you understanding that, okay, everything has to be God, and that includes me.
Mm-hmm.
But when you say God consciousness, what do you mean by that?
So there's an experience that we can have, and I've had that experience on a number of occasions, where we can actually transcend our own personal experience completely, in which we're no longer perceiving anything, any resemblance of the human reality, any resemblance of my human existence. So it's like a state of pure consciousness. And in those experiences, the deepest that I've gone, it's been pure consciousness and pure energy. So there's no individuated form. There's just one light, and to me it looks brilliant white, like pure white, and it fills everything, and there's no distance between myself and it. And I am perceiving it while I'm also being it. And there's also no time, and there's no experience of reflection. And that's the way that I understand there's no time, because as soon as there's a movement, that state vanishes. So if I even have the realization that I'm having an experience, then I leave that state, because to have a reflection of understanding, there has to be separation. There has to be something else I'm reflecting upon, and then the space in which the idea appears. So in deep meditation, or it's happened spontaneously with me sometimes, like in your experience, there's a greater power than your will that just takes you there. And that's how it first started happening with me, is that I'm taken to this place where my own personal will just vanishes and I'm being a state of pure awareness. And the way I understand it is it's just pure creative energy filling all of the space, and there's infinite intelligence, and I am all of this. And then as I come out of that place, the forms start appearing from that light. And so my understanding has been that that light is the appearance of the energy that creates the forms in any dimension, in any reality. And then when I came out of it, the first time it happened, I don't know how long I was in the state, maybe 10 or 20 seconds, but there was no time, but it felt like that. I came out of it and I was extremely blissful. And I knew without a shadow of a doubt that everything was the same as myself. And I remember I was in Sedona. I remember looking outside of my door, and I opened the door and I walked outside, and everything was shining with light, like all the plants and the leaves and everything was shining with this white aura around it. It wasn't like if you see an individual aura that it's like outlining. It was like everything is like radiating and shining. So the energy's in front of the plants and around the plants and behind the plants. It's just like everywhere is this white light. And I knew inside myself that this is all the same infinite energy of God, and it's just appearing as a finite temporary experience right now.
Hmm. Interesting.
So for me, when I talk about God realization or self-realization, there's stages. And the first is intellectual, just understanding it conceptually, because that does start to change you. But then as you go into that understanding, it becomes experiential. And maybe at first you notice I feel more connected to everyone, and I feel more love, and I feel more freedom, and I'm not having my old thoughts and my old self. It's like, yeah, you're just developing this understanding, and it's becoming the experience you're having because you're the creator of the experience you're having. And if you really go into that idea, like that singular idea, if you stay with it, it appears as the fullness of your experience. So if I'm just like thinking of God, for example, or like the all that is, that which is creating me, but also that which is being me and being everything else, I just feel this happiness start to emerge. So if we stay with a single idea, and like you can have the thought once or the intention once, but then you just rest into the feeling of that idea, that idea just becomes a stronger experience in your reality. So it's kind of like they would say, like in like a mantra teaching, like a mantra meditation, you create the mantra and you stay with it until you get distracted by another thought. And then you produce the mantra again. And so if you can stay with an idea long enough, you'll start manifesting the energy of that idea. You'll feel what that idea means. And then if you stay with it even longer, that vibrational feeling starts to fill your mind's eye. And you'll even start to see it with your non-physical senses. So if you're able to focus in on your third eye or your mind's eye strong enough, you actually can perceive the color or the light or the energy of that idea that you're having.
Mm.
And then so how deeply can you stay with it? How long can you stay with it? How much can you surrender yourself into that idea?
Mm.
But like I said, the similar to the first time you've had your experience, it just happened to me. So the first time I had this experience that was like full on blissful dimension, I just was really tired. So I had just graduated college at the time, and I moved out to Arizona, and it was the first month I was there. And I thought, you know what, before I like go find a job, I mean, I had my own business, but I was going to need more income. So before I go, find a job or commit myself to developing my own business, I'm going to do a month spiritual retreat. So I decided I'm not going to do any work. I'm not going to open my computer at all. I'm just going to meditate every day for a month, for 30 days, as long as I can. And it was around maybe day 12 or so that I woke up one morning and, ate my breakfast and I started doing a meditation. And it was about 10 a.m. at that time. And I felt extremely tired, like the kind of tired where you're trying to like drive a car at like 2 a.m. and you're starting to fall asleep. Like you can't control your body tired.
Yeah.
And this was like 10 a.m. and I never get tired in the daytime. And I thought, this is strange. And I just started meditating when this extreme tiredness came over me. And so I went to my bedroom and I wanted to lay down. I was like, I can't sit up and meditate. I'm just going to lay down. So I went to my bedroom, and as soon as I laid down, I instantly left this reality. Like as soon as my head touched the pillow, I was gone. And I woke up, I instantly appeared in this dimension of pure light in which I knew I was everything I was perceiving. And then I was there for maybe 20 seconds or so, but I didn't know time necessarily because it wasn't until I felt the knowing that I'm having this experience
Uh-huh.
that then it started to fade away.
Yeah.
And I came back in the bedroom. And another cool thing happened. The bedroom I was in was really bright and I could see everything very clear. And I'm just laying there in the bed. And again, like 30 seconds passed. And then I realized I can feel that my eyelids are closed. So I was seeing my room crystal clear, but I felt then that my eyelids were closed. And then I opened up my physical eyes and I realized I was seeing through my physical eyes, but they were closed. I was using my mind's eye and I was actually seeing into the physical world, which then points to that experience you were having where you could sense everything was energy and like you could touch through the walls. It's like, yeah, my eyes were closed and I was seeing the room just like my eyes were open. There was visually no difference when I opened my physical eyes then. So it shows me as well, our consciousness is creating the image of this reality. It's not the physical body that creates our perception of the world. It's our consciousness that creates our perception of the world.
Interesting. I'm trying to, just based on what I've been learning about. So a man named Robert Edward Grant, he's really interesting. He's on the faculty at the Resonant Science Foundation. Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not.
Do you know who Nassim Haramein is?
I'm aware of him. I knew about him 20 years ago because he was
Yeah.
popular in Sedona.
Yeah. So he started the Resonant Science Foundation, and Robert Edward Grant is part of that, and he teaches a course in there called The Language of Light. I think it's what it's called, and then also the etymology of numerology or of number, the etymology of number or something like that. I haven't taken the course yet, but I've just been watching a couple of interviews of him, and he basically he shows that how, or he talks about how our eyes are rendering the physical or creating the physical reality, right? Based on our beliefs. But it just, so I'm trying to, with what you're saying, and I'll have to kind of ruminate on it for a little while to see how those things are put together. Sometimes, not sometimes, often our experience is not actually what is happening, right? And so we think that the material world is out there, but it's actually inside of us. And we also think that time is real, but time is really an illusion. And the physical forms we think are real, but they also too are an illusion, right? And so I'm just trying to take what you said about how our consciousness is creating it and not the senses. So the consciousness, so how would you, can you
Yeah. So first, just to introduce my vernacular, because one thing that always kind of I didn't like was when people would say it's not real. And because my experience is it is real. And the fact that it's an illusion, the way I look at an illusion, it's like a magic trick. It appears to be one way, but actually it's something else. So I use the example of a woman in a box getting sawed in half, and it looks like the magician sawed her body in half and then slides them apart. And so it appears that way. But the reality of it is that no, there's actually two bodies in those boxes. So for me, the world is happening. We're all perceiving it. And we're also all agreeing upon aspects of it. But within that global collective consciousness agreement, there's all these variables that each of us experiences individually. So we all agree that like this tree is planted in this location. So everybody drives by that area, sees the tree. So there is this collective consciousness holding together aspects of reality, but then within that, we all have our own personal interpretation and we have our personal perceptions, because you might notice something when you're standing next to me and I don't see it. It happened, but I wasn't aware of it. So it only happened in your reality. But because we're all collective, it did happen in my reality, but not to the same impact, not to the same level.
Mhm.
So it's always been like fingernails grating the chalkboard when people say life isn't real.
Yeah.
Because for me, it's like, no, this is what creation is for God. It appears like this, and it's malleable, and it's not solid. Well, I shouldn't say that. It appears solid when your perception is vibrating at the same level as it. But if I change my perception, meaning I change like the idea of my identity of who I am, then I change what I'm perceiving. So if I, for example, know myself as a vibrating mass of light, then the world's forms start behaving as a vibrating mass of light. And then I can put my hand through the wall. So for me, it's how I identify myself, how I understand myself that determines the shape that this malleable universe takes. So for me, the energy is real, the experience is real, it's really happening. And we've had a limited understanding thinking that things don't change. Things are solid, things are fixed. The object itself is like a block with no space within it. When in reality, no, it's actually just vibrating space. You look at anything and the atom is a tiny, tiny particle inside of space, but it's the vibration, it's the magnetism, it's that electricity, that electromagnetic field that gives the perception of solidity. So we're actually touching the electricity or the etheric energy of an object. We're not actually touching matter because matter is such a tiny piece of a larger space.
Matter is actually space.
It is, yeah. It's all, yeah. I call it like
Right.
the God particle.
Yeah.
So it's all God's consciousness just vibrating emptiness to create a perception of
Yes.
form, of color, of sound, of something. But
Yeah.
again, it's all emptiness.
Yeah. And that's what like Nassim brought to light for everybody too,
Mhm.
is that. And he's unified the two fields of physics, quantum
Mhm.
physics and general relativity,
Mhm.
which is what Einstein died doing, tried to do. But anyway, so what I mean by real is that it's not as solid, just like what you were saying,
Yeah.
it's not as solid as we think it is. Because in Vedanta, what you learn is, so I forgot this, I can't say it, it's in Sanskrit, but it's Brahman, Satya, so what is it? Okay, Brahman, Satya, Jagat, Mithya, Jiva, or Jivo, which is um, the self not knowing it's the self. I forgot the last words, but basically what it says is Brahman is all that is, and that's the only thing, or the one. Okay, Brahman is the one, and that's the only thing that's real. Satya is real or truth. Okay, so Brahman, Satya, Jagat, which is the world, Mithya. So Jagat, the world, is apparently real. It's a dream,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? And so the only truth is consciousness, pure consciousness. And then everything else is apparently real. And
Yeah.
Jivo is not Jiva, us thinking, not knowing we're God, is no different than Brahman, no different than God, right?
Mhm.
So that's what I mean by real. So a lot of
Yeah.
people, when I've had conversations, they get upset with that word when I say it's not real. But so we have to, I'm glad you brought that up because we have to define what I mean by
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And yeah, because I look at it as like you're explaining that the world of forms gets its reality from God. It's the creation of the creator, and you can remove the creation and the creator still exists.
Yes.
But we also know the existence of God because we know creation. So ourselves being God are witnessing God's existence by witnessing creation. So it's kind of like they'll say God is the unknowable. So as I'm existing, I can never know God except through its creation. So I can assume basically or deduce logically that there's a supreme intelligence that's existing beyond everything I'm perceiving. And the closest I can get to it while I'm a human is perceiving the forms of its creation.
Mhm.
But in order for myself to perceive the ultimate reality of what it is, I have to leave this human state of perception. So I have to drop experiencing myself as being inside of creation, and I have to go beyond creation. And in all of my research, that state of going beyond creation has no experience. So there was a beautiful book that I read, and it was really the only place I've ever heard it described as eloquently as it was. that you can get to that place that I told you I was taken to and that I've revisited where everything is light. And there is a state beyond that, but you'll never know what it is. Because if you go beyond creation, there's no experience happening anymore. And then you realize that I am that which is beyond creation, but my experience is dependent upon creation. So I start to see the creation as the same as myself.
So you
It's
don't think
kind of,
that you don't think the white light um, state was beyond creation?
no, no. My understanding is that it was the first thing created. So in the beginning,
Light.
so the
Yeah.
invisible hand of God, the God that we are, that we can't perceive, it's like the eyeball can't see itself.
Mhm.
All it can see is a reflection of itself in the mirror, which isn't the same as seeing itself. And it can also deduce that it exists because it can see everything else. So that's kind of like God. Our consciousness, we perceiving everything. I can perceive your consciousness, but I can't really perceive myself as consciousness other than the I am existing state.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
the God self that we are and that everything is, it's beyond everything perceivable. So the first thing that the universe did or that God did was create one thing. So for me, that white light dimension, I call the first dimension or the first created experience. I don't consider it the end. I actually consider it the beginning because one thing is created. So it's one energy and it's filling all of the space of perception. So there's nothing other than this one energy. So for me, that's like the alpha. That's where everything began, the first dimension. It's the singularity state. So if you put, like in the first dimension, it's only one thing, so it's only aware of itself. And in the second dimension, you have 2 points. And so now you have awareness of self and awareness of other. And there's a distance between the 2 points, and that allows for a reflection. So now I can understand it. And then the third dimension is a third point, which means the two interacted and created something else. And so now you have a three-dimensional reality. So that's how I look at the created experience. Um, yeah. So for me, the universe right now is like the most advanced experience inside of my awareness. So many people in spirituality think, I'm supposed to go back to the beginning. And there's a great value, especially when I was there, a great value in experiencing that first dimension because it shows you everything is one. But then when you come back into your life, you realize that you're at the forefront of creation and you're actually creating the universe and you're creating what that light does next. So the most advanced experience is the most complex experience because that's the evolution of one to two to three to four to infinite forms. And so right now is actually the place where you want to exist as God because you're participating in creating God's universe
You mean in the present moment
in
when
the
you
present moment, in your world, in your reality. And then if we look at it like that and we really start to embrace this human experience, we then also realize that it's about expanding my consciousness and my experience of existence into the biggest state. So we become multidimensionally aware. We become aware of what our intelligence is and what our intelligence can do. We become aware of the infinite energy. So instead of deducing back to one, we're expanding to discover the infinite possibilities. And through that process of expansion, we realize I'm the creator. When we go back to the beginning, we realize I'm the creator, but it's tactilely different. It feels like there's no self in a way. And when we become the creator, it's like I've realized what myself is. Because I know myself as that
when you
invisible.
when you mean you come into the present moment, then you know yourself as the creator. Is that what you mean?
It is coming into the present moment, but it's also more than just that. Um, so when we come into the present moment, I usually consider that like a witnessing state. And it's only when we can witness that we can start to learn. Right? Witnessing is like listening with your eyes. You're taking in new information, you're putting together a greater understanding while you just witness what's happening. The universe is teaching you while you witness. So that's necessary. But through that process of witnessing, we start to understand that I'm not just an observer of life, I'm a creator of life. And this is where my experience kind of goes away from some of these other spiritual and religious traditions that emphasize don't do anything, just watch the world happen around you. Because in the East, there's a strong emphasis on just reside within and don't do anything. And so you basically just watch all the forms live and die, and you don't do anything else. And for me, that doesn't seem like the reason why the universe is happening.
Yeah.
The universe isn't being created so we can wake up and realize it's a horrible place. Let's just get out of here.
Yeah.
Like God would not make that
Yeah.
understanding manifest, I don't believe. So for me, the higher understanding is seeing everything as myself. And when I do that, then I transcend the limited idea that a lot of spiritual systems hold on to. And that is the world's a place of suffering, just stay as a witness and let it all happen.
Yeah.
So as I enter into a higher realization, because I live more fully in the present moment, this desire to communicate and participate and express just gets greater and greater. And that's the evidence then that I'm a creator of life as well. So then we realize I'm the creator beyond everything, but also the creator within everything. And I see you as that. I see a tree as that. I see the paint on my wall as that. Like everything's creating its own existence, everything's perceiving its own creation, and everything's co-creating together this whole reality.
Mm. Yeah, I'll have to listen to that again because yeah, I have this idea based on what I've learned is that we are creating it. So there's root assumptions. So this is like Seth talks about root assumptions. So in this earth experience, there's root assumptions. Like we have the 5 elements or the 4 elements, right? So we have air, water, fire, earth, right?
Yeah,
And everything that's all the material forms are going to be some combination of that.
mm-hmm.
But we are creating that experience. It's like our own little crystal ball, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll have to think about what you just said.
Yeah, I think a good analogy is this human experience is like an open source computer program. So if you think of a computer program,
Yeah,
there's a team that designs it, but open source means that anybody can come in and modify it and change it. So we like step into a reality that we as individual manifestations of God and the collective of God has been creating and sustaining.
mm-hmm.
So karma and change and influences of past time have built this right now. And so we step into a program that was already designed for us. And then when we wake up in that program, we realize we have the power to design it as well.
Yeah.
So we can change on a limited level, we can change our personal experiences, but I also believe on a greater level, we can change, I think what you called the root beliefs. We can change the root assumptions. We can change those core ideas that then, the whole world believes in.
Yeah.
And I see that with like mankind not being able to fly.
Yeah.
For thousands of years or millions of years, mankind never tried to fly. And then at some point, somebody believes it so strongly and has to prove it that they then create this new experience. And now everybody knows, oh, yeah, we can fly.
Yeah.
And we can use all these different tools to do so.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, that's what's happening here is like the more of us that are understanding reality differently, we're bringing that knowledge in and grounding it into the physical world.
Yeah.
And that's what will then change the shape of our experience in the next moment and in the next moment and the next moment. So I have also had that experience where I experienced myself as just pure white light. And I was experiencing it, I was seeing it, and there was like, I knew I was experiencing it, but then as soon as I had the thought of what's happening here, or then I popped out, came out of it.
Yeah.
But at the time I didn't know what that was. That was very early on in when I started kind of this, the conscious journey, spiritual journey. And it was very, very, very early on. And I just started meditating and I had this experience. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't understand it. And it was only years later, and I don't know, maybe it was you, I started to understand what that was.
Yeah.
But I haven't been able to go back there since, but I just recently found your video, the mind mastery one, where it said it's called wake up to your source light. And I'll put that in the comments down below. But I feel like with that meditation, I'll be able to learn how to go back there. Mm-hmm. But that's my question to you. Can you do that at will? Can you go back to that state at will? Or do you feel like it's some people say it's grace that allows, it's like you're waiting at the door and you're waiting for God to open up that door.
Yeah. Well, to answer the two questions, first, my experience is when we don't fully understand how something is created, or maybe we do understand it, but we're not able to participate in that creative process completely, then we often depersonalize the power. God did it for me. God made it rain. Well, now mankind can make it rain.
Mhm.
We know how to make it rain. And but before we always thought it was a creation beyond our own abilities. And I think it's like that in meditation. There's external sciences and there's internal sciences. So we can learn how to create these inner experiences because we're God and everything is possible inside of the infinite self that God is. So if I know how to get back there, then I can reproduce it. Or
Mhm.
if I was aware enough as it was being created with me, then I can reproduce it. So for myself, the first time it happened, it just happened, definitely. It started to appear again as a consistent state when I was doing the channeling work. So this was 2004 when I first had the experience. And then in 2007, I think it was, or 2008 maybe, I started doing the 99 days, 99 channels. So for an hour every day or half hour to an hour every day, I'd sit and I'd channel live on camera. And what started happening was my eyes were open when I was channeling because I wanted to show everybody that, like, I wanted to give them experiential, not necessarily evidence, but data to observe. So I wanted people to realize, like, I'm not reading anything. I didn't write this beforehand. So I'll channel with my eyes open and my eyes closed. And I'm going to show you that my mind is incredibly still and I'm not making it up. So my eyes are going to not move at all. And so I would channel for like an hour and not blink, and my eyes wouldn't move. So you can see I'm not reading anything behind the camera and I'm not thinking about it. It's definitely channeling. Because in my experience, I would see channels, and based upon my opinion, they're just making it up from their subconscious,
Yeah.
and their eyes all over the place. And it's like that's a sign that you're drawing from your own personal mind. If you're really channeled, you're completely surrendered and you're allowing it to come through you. And it shouldn't look like you're trying to find the words or struggling to find the words sometimes. So for me, I wanted to like give people a big display that I felt could validate the experience for myself and also for them. So while I was doing this and I was channeling with eyes open, I started to notice that around the periphery of my vision, all this white light started coming in. And I'm just staring at the camera doing the channeling, and all of this white light starts filling in. And it got to such a place of intensity that all I could see was the lens of the camera, and everything else in my field of vision was perfectly white. And I could no longer see through the white light, it was that thick. And I was just in this state of letting it all come through me.
Wow.
So for myself, my consciousness shifted back into that state by myself feeling my heart and surrendering all of myself to that heart. And so I'm channeling while I'm in that heart space, and the information's just wanting to come through. And now I'm perceiving where I would say that, that higher self, how the higher self knows itself. And this is why I describe the higher self as a state of universal intelligence, awareness, and energy that's one with everything. Because in that first dimension of creation, all the intelligence, all the energy, all the space, it existed as a single experience. And that's where I go when I channel sometimes. If I just want to let go completely of holding on to the physical reality, that's where I go. So I've learned how to reproduce that just by like watching how it happens. And it's like a very subtle fine tuning. It's like how I meditate. So like when you get to levels of meditation, you realize you don't use the same logical mind that you use to like problem solve. It's like fine tuning adjustments in my mental body. And it feels almost like feeling. It's like I'm trying to adjust the udder of a boat in like a very subtle way to navigate. So it's kind of like that. And so for me, it's really about having an intention to be one with the all that is. And then when I'm in that intention, automatically I notice out of my heart arises this beautiful feeling of oneness and love. And I stay in that feeling and I give myself over to it. I allow it to become what it wants to become,
Mhm.
because the love feels like it wants to shine and it wants to expand. I'm not trying to make it happen.
Yeah.
That's what it wants to do. And can I fully surrender myself into what that spiritual heart energy wants to do? So for me, the spiritual heart energy is the beginning of our expression. And if I can go into that fully, it appears as that original first dimension. So I've put together then that the beginning of my own existence is that first dimension. When the universe was born, I was born. And that is always existing within me. And then, like what you said earlier, there's the example of the projector, the film projector and the screen. And so then the idea is that light bulb at the film projector, that's at the beginning of us.
Yeah.
And that's inside the center of the aura, which is the spiritual heart area, the deepest layer of the mental body, the center of that. And when I go into that, I realize that's the power, the awareness, like the power and the awareness and the intelligence that creates everything. And that's what I am. That's where I was first created to be. That's my soul. And it's one with God. It's the same principle of the all that is. It's the original principle, the original creation. But then also, I'm something greater than that, because that's still a creation. I'm that which created that experience, but that's the unknowable because I have to exit the creation to experience what that is. And for myself, I've never consciously gone there, but I deduced that it's there, and I found one book of all the studies that actually describes that and says that that exists.
What is that book?
I believe it's called The Lamp of Non-Dual Knowledge.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So it's probably based on Vedanta.
Yeah, it is.
Something.
Okay. Yeah, this is I don't know if it was Shankara who wrote The Lamp of Non-Dual Knowledge.
Yeah, I think, but
It might have been him. Yeah, I read this when I was in like 2004 or five when I first got to Sedona.
yeah,
Because it was only an ebook. I had to download it and print it out, because it wasn't, no one ever published it in a print form.
yeah.
Yeah, this was a dialogue between a teacher and a student.
Okay.
And so the student is asking, the teacher questions, and the teacher describes reality and how it's created. And then he does reference that there's an unknowable or an unmanifest part of existence. And when you're in that white light state, there will be experiences where you vanish from all perceptual reality, all experience whatsoever. And then you return back into perceptual experience. And you realize that you existed when you were gone, but you don't know what was happening because there was no longer an experience.
Yeah. So it's really interesting because that's kind of what that experience that I was describing earlier. It was like but I knew, I mean, I did experience myself as the light.
Yeah.
And it was when I had the thought, what is this? Or
Mhm.
wow. Or,
Yeah.
it's like, wow, or what is this? Then I popped out.
Yeah. So the way I look at that is the first dimension, you're completely being the energy of life. You are it. There's no separation between you and the energy of life. So you're aware of that because that's the first creation. That's the first dimension, one dot on a piece of paper.
I
And then
am.
as soon as you have a reflection or an idea, and you interpret it, your mind reflects on the experience. That reflection creates time and
Is that the I
distance.
am state? Which is the I am state?
The best way I heard it described was Ramana Maharshi when he said, the I before the I, or the I thought before the I. It's like that, or the I before the
Okay.
I thought.
The
I forget
one
how it's
thinking the I
translated.
thought. The one,
Yeah. So the I thought is the exit happens rather in the creation of the second dimension. Because now, as soon as I have a thought about something, as soon as I recognize that something's happening, then time exists, space exists, and self and other. Because I've now reflected on the experience. I'm the self reflecting on the other, and the other is the experience I'm having. So that's the second dimension. It's me having an experience, it's self and other. Before that reflection happened, there was only me. And I was being that. I was being the environment. I was the environment until I reflected on it. And now myself and the environment are two different things.
right.
So beyond the perception of existing, beyond the first dimension, there's the zero dimension. There's nothing yet's created. That's the state that, according to this book, we can touch into, but we'll never know what happens there because nothing is happening there. We'll just know we went somewhere and we came back.
Right.
It's like when people fall asleep at night and go into an unconscious state. You don't know where you went. You just had existence turn off and then turn back on when you woke up again, whether you woke up in a dream or you woke up in the physical world. But you knew that you existed. You knew that there's a lapse of time. And even though I wasn't perceiving, I still am.
Mm-hmm.
And so I am the unbreakable experience. I am the undeniable experience. I am the reality. I'm that which cannot be created nor destroyed. Matter can be created and destroyed, unless you look at, like Einstein, it can't be created or destroyed, it just changes its manifest form. And we say that's true in this dimension because the energy doesn't get created. But what if we remove the energy itself? Is there an experience where the energy goes dormant from an expression? So in that zero dimension, the potential for everything exists because the potential is still held within God because God's the all-powerful self. But God's not moving within itself to create the universe yet. So that potential energy is infinite and always exists. And that's part of the unmanifest. It's there, but it's not manifesting. It's not appearing yet as an expression. So we're not negating the energy. It just becomes potential energy rather than kinetic energy. And the whole universe becomes a potential when we go back into the unmanifest.
Yeah, I'm trying to reconcile that with what I've, so the vacuum,
Mm-hmm.
an empty space that we exist in and that all material forms are born out of is so, and they know that it's a highly charged, or not charged, but highly dynamic space, or
Mm-hmm.
plasma is what they
Yeah,
call
I
it.
see that as different. Yeah. So the vacuum, what I see is that in between all the dimensions, there's a void state. And the void state mirrors the whole structure of the universe, specifically mirroring the unmanifest God state. So it's like my reality is that everything is a hologram of God. So I can find evidence of everything that God is in every experience I'm having. So when I'm awake, that's like the universe being created. When I'm unconscious in sleep, that's like the unmanifest God experience.
Mhm.
When I'm awake and I'm looking at the forms are like the creation of energy, and the formless, which is the void, is like the unmanifest God state. But is the void that we witness in the world, in the physical dimension, the same as the unmanifest God state? I don't believe it is, because there's still an interaction of separateness within that void, that physical void we're observing. It's like I'm observing the void. I watch things come out of the void. There's still a self and other as I participate with the creation that the void is.
Mm.
So God created the void as a backdrop for the physical dimension. And the void has a lot of the same properties as the unmanifest God has. So too do all the forms have a lot of the same properties as the unmanifest God has. So I still see any appearance of anything is the creation. Even if it's very unmanifest like in its appearance, it's still a creation of the God source.
Okay.
So we'll understand a lot more about what God is by understanding the void. We'll also understand a lot more about what God is by understanding the forms and by understanding our consciousness as creators.
So when you say void, are you talking about what I was talking about, the empty space?
Like outer space. Like outer space is nearly a perfect vacuum. And within that space, it's absolute blackness and a perfect void, nothing can exist within. Right? That's what I've heard. I'm trying to remember, 30 years ago in grade school science. So in the void space, nothing can exist. In a perfect vacuum, nothing can exist. But the vacuum has the potential to hold something in it, which means the vacuum has potential to create something in it. So for me, that's like a representation of what God is. That representation of the vacuum is a physical construct. And then there's a void quality to every dimension as well. So that's that emptiness quality.
So I guess, yeah, this is some confusion because, what they know about empty space is that it's not empty.
Yeah.
So it's
So
actually
yeah,
filled with infinite, like they can't even really quantify the energy. And it's something that physicists threw out years ago because so Nassim talks about how there's two types of infinities. There's the very small infinity, which is so infinitesimal, it's easy to throw out because it doesn't really make a difference. But then there's like nasty infinities, which are infinities that are so large that they don't know what to do with, right?
sure. Yeah.
And so that's what they found when they threw out the idea of the ether, or the empty space, or space being not empty, is they found that it was filled with so much energy, and a nasty infinity. And
Mhm.
so what they ended up doing was reducing it down to something that they could use. And what they decided to do was quantify the amount of energy that would be in 1 cubic centimeter of space. And that is 10, that was, I think it might be have changed now, but it was 10 to the 93rd. So what that means is 10 with 93 zeros
Mhm.
behind it.
Yeah.
And that is the energy in one like sugar cube of space,
Mhm.
right? And that
Yeah.
and the energy that the unit that the Earth uses in 1 year is, I believe, 10 to the 20 joules. So the amount that's in 1 cubic centimeter space could fuel Earth for a
Mhm.
long time, right?
Yeah.
But the empty space is not really empty. So,
Mhm. Yeah.
so that is the potential. That's the pure potential energy. It's not manifest yet. Or would you call
But
that
no,
kinetic still?
if it's measurable, then it's still existing. If it's even if it's not expressing as matter, even if it's like just dormant but vibrating, that's still a form that's appearing. So the
So you would say
opposite
that.
of that, absolute zero, absolute void. Maybe we'll never be able to find absolute void. I don't believe we ever will be
No.
able to find absolute
Yeah.
void. I believe so. My experience, like we were talking about the two types of infinity, is that just by the definition that the universe is infinite, that the smaller you get in your perception, the more you're going to just keep finding things and keep going. And the bigger you get in your perception, the more you're going to keep finding things and going. So a microscope is always going to find things the smaller it gets, and a telescope's always going to find things the bigger it gets. We're never going to run out of creation, because then that would show us that God, in fact, is not the all that is. If we run out of creation, then there's a limitation to God, a limitation to creation. So no matter where we're looking, we're going to find energy. The void, by definition, if we want to be like really precise, would be absolutely nothing. So the 90 or the joules, like 10 to the 96 power, or whatever the number was you said, that is still something we're measuring. That's still a form. That's still creation. That might be like the turning on of a motor and the car is an idle. So we're going to measure the engine in idle. It's not really going anywhere or doing anything, but it's vibrating at 10 to the 93 power. But as soon as we start to put on the gas pedal, now we're starting to see creation, and we're realizing what all the energy can be used for. But even the car idling is still a creation. Even 10 to the 93, it's still a creation. So if we want to get really precise with the wording, when we actually approach a void, there's nothing to measure. A true vacuum, there's nothing to measure. And the only way to get there is to go beyond any type of experience whatsoever, which means the whole universe has to stop being perceived and experienced.
So
And then we
beyond
can
the
say,
white light,
ah, yeah,
beyond the white
beyond the
light.
white light, that's the zero dimension. That's the unmanifest, the uncreated. And in Taoism, in the Tao Te Ching, they'll say, like the mystery within the mystery is the Tao. And before there was God, there was the Tao. And this means before there were religious ideas of a creator, there was this unknowable of the unknowables, this mystery of the mysteries. And that points to the fact that this will never be experienced, this will never be understood. It's like the only unanswerable question, because to get the answer to it, you have to dissolve yourself into a non-experience.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to ask, So you kind of touched on a little bit. So can you describe that again, just for clarity? The maybe like the spirit into the causal body or the mental body into the astral body into the,
Yeah.
can you describe that, how you understand?
Yeah, so essentially, if we want to look at these like these dimensions, like physics defines it with 1 point and then 2 points and 3 points, and you connect the lines and you have 3 dimension, 4 dimension, so on. Essentially, the first dimension still has mind in it. So some people would call it like pure spirit, but for me, like pure spirit is pure consciousness, which means nothing else, because pure means 100%, right? Which means there's nothing else. So pure consciousness means that there's nothing being perceived. There's only the consciousness. There's not consciousness perceiving something. So the first dimension is consciousness creating an experience. And so that would be the first mental dimension experience. So the
Okay.
mind of God creates your personal mind, and that's why you're having a perceptual experience when you're in that white light state. The second dimension then is the recognition that I'm having an experience. That's the I am that I am. That's the I am saying I exist. It's the I saying, I am that I am, I exist. So there's a loop back, there's a reflection on one's own existence. And that's the second dimension. Once we recognize I have existence, once we know I am that I am, now we're in the next evolution of the mental dimension. When that happens, my experience is there's different colors, there's different movements of like feeling and color and not separate shapes, but it's more like you're being the ocean, or it's like the aurora borealis, like there's like color and it waves and it moves, and you're understanding as it's changing, what you're perceiving is energy moving. So you realize your mind is pure energy in a creative motion. And if you are not having an understanding, all the colors return back to the original state, which is white light, because every understanding we have negates something else. And so that's why we see separate colors and we feel different vibrations when we're in that mental dimension in deep, deep meditation, when we're still having an experience and participating in an experience. And we know that we're participating in an experience, but we're not identified as a separate part of an experience. So the second dimension is like waves of energy, waves of color and light. That's still the mental dimension, but now the mind is doing something, which is just observing itself as ever-changing, infinite mental energy.
Okay.
Then the third dimension is the mental energy wants to create something. It doesn't just want to be something. When it's being something, it's reflecting I am that I am, and it's perceiving moving, changing colors. Now it wants to create something, which means space and the void has to appear as separating the forms. The void, or I should say the emptiness, that's probably a safer terminology. So the emptiness appears as integrated with the energy in the first and second dimension. The energy appears inside of space, but the space is not identifiable as something separate than the energy until the third dimension. So now we see like two balls of light and a empty space in between them. So that's the third dimension, because now there is like self, space, and other. There's three things.
Okay.
So now we have these three aspects, and now there can be interaction, a more complex style of interaction. So in that third dimension, I would call that the appearance of the astral dimension, because now I've localized myself as a separate form inside of space. I'm a being with a form, with an energy body. I appear as an energy inside of space, and I witness other forms of consciousness appearing as individual forms of energy.
Okay.
So the higher up in the astral dimension, the more of an original unity-based understanding those forms of consciousness have. So they appear just like balls of light. Okay. And that's why they're blissful and they feel like all love and this unity energy. It's because they've just started their differentiation from the original energy of life, from that unity state of causal mental dimension into now an individual existence. But they haven't really adopted an individual identity. They're very much in the present moment, just being a manifestation of God with all these other manifestations of God, and we're perceiving each other as separate life forms. Then that's like the highest vibration of the astral. And then as we lower our vibration, it happens because we're starting to identify with separate ideas. So when I'm just being a separate form, I'm in the all that is type of understanding. And I'm just blissing and shining. I'm being creative energy. And there's no other identity. There's no other ideas. I'm just shining. I'm just being. So there's a constant orb of light that I am. And it's like shining light in all directions. It's a sphere has equal pressure at every position. So that means my mind is only the manifestation of one idea. And it's an equalized, unified idea. So as soon as I start having individual ideas, then I start changing the shape of my light body and I start appearing like whatever I believe I am. So I'll change color. I can look like any form of life. I can look like a bolt of lightning if I want. I can look like a cube. I can look like a human being or a plant. I can look like an amoeba. That light body, it molds itself based upon the understanding I have about who I am and about what I want to express into the space in front of me. Okay.
So how does, I guess what I'm looking for is, so that first dimension, or that I am, that's the causal, what you would call the causal body or the mental body, that's happening there. So
Yeah.
is that I am. So I heard you say, and I actually feel like I experienced this, is the spiritual heart is the first dimension of us here
Yeah.
in this physical reality. I've also heard Bashar, I don't know if you're familiar with Bashar, talk about how the heart is really what connects all of everything, even other realms, right? It's the heart. So I look at that as really the vacuum, right? The mind of God as the heart, the dimension that the heart is, the spiritual heart. But anyway, so I look at that, we come in through the spiritual heart. Our consciousness is here, that I am state is here. And then it develops into the human psyche, which is the astral dimension. Is that right? Or
I define it differently because I use the word human to as a label for the physical material form that gets birthed by my parents' biological bodies.
okay, so I look at human as just the human psyche and the physical.
Yeah. So yeah.
So that's what I call human. So
Mhm.
the spiritual heart is where our consciousness comes into this realm, like kind of like focuses, like just like when you create an idea or when you create an image in your mind, you're just kind of you're going into this little point and then it's becoming this like balloon, right? That's why we show cartoons that has like the bubble, because you're creating an idea. But so the idea is we come into this idea of earth through the spiritual heart. That's like the portal. And then we from the experiences we have while we're here, we develop the human psyche. But I think we actually develop that the idea of the human psyche is there already. It's us. When we come in here, we know we're coming in to fulfill certain themes or to explore certain themes. And that theme is our DNA. It's contained, that knowledge is contained in the DNA. And then, and really what we are is DNA with this human package around it. And the human package is a reflection of that DNA. And then, but the light of our consciousness is shining through that prism, so to speak, the colors of the psyche, and then that is what's being projected as the physical world. That's the way I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say about that?
Yeah, a lot of it's accurate according to my experience. Um, so for me, yeah, this I often refer to the spiritual heart as like a doorway, and that's where our eternal consciousness comes into form. So in my explanation, those dimensions I was describing is what they appear to be for me when I'm in them and the physical dimensions removed. Okay, so I drop the physical dimension, no longer perceiving it at all. And then if I'm in an individualized experience, I call it the astral dimension, and I'm made of pure energy, and the energy is moldable based upon my understanding of myself. So that's like the personality you were talking about, like the psyche. So when I plug myself into being physical, so I take my causal aspect, which is creating myself as an astral aspect, and that gets plugged into the physical aspect. And so the soul, what people often call the soul, but I would call it like the part of your psyche that incarnates over multiple lifetimes, like your astral personality, I often call it. That plugs into the physical body, and the physical body remembers. And the physical body remembers everything you expressed into it from your astral personality, which goes with you throughout all these lifetimes and you evolve through all these lifetimes. And then also whatever your body has perceived from the world gets remembered by your physical body. And the DNA then is the result of both of those coming together. So as we know, you inherit your DNA, but I believe, I don't know if scientists have proved it because I don't really study this. I believe that your DNA changes over your lifetime as well, because that's the universe evolving. If it was just passed down through reproduction, I think that would be a very slow and limited way of evolving physical life. And when I look at it, my choices and my decisions, some of them, especially the more awakened I am, come from beyond my human conditioning. My intuition, my higher mind, even like the universal mind, that comes through me to express upon matter. So I'm not just a living reaction. Scientists often think we're a living reaction. They treat us like computer programs or robots or Pavlov's dog, but we're more advanced than that. We're the next evolution in life compared to mammals, other animals. Um, so for me, you come into the spiritual heart, and even like the thought bubble idea, when I have a thought and it's a conscious created thought, I feel the energy beginning at my heart. And then it actually rises up into my head and I have an idea. But if I'm just witnessing and I'm not consciously trying to use my personal mind, then the thought energy comes out of my lower chakras, where for me that's the subconscious mind and the memories of my body. So like my body has its own psyche, and I call it the memory based self, or the past conditioned self, or the memory based conditioning. Those are words I often use. And then your conscious self feels like me as a creator, and that's your astral personality. That's your identity as an individual form of life in the universe, coming in and creating with matter, like a person puts their hand in a puppet and wants to create with the puppet's body.
So you wouldn't say that that is your you see, I guess what, yeah, I think the confusion here is I think of the astral as the human psyche, the the non-physical. So
Yeah.
not the material. I think of the human as the when I say human, I mean both the astral, which I'm calling the human psyche, and the physical body together.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
So,
then,
yeah, and I agree in that way. We do connect into the body, and the body communicates based upon its memories. So, automatic thoughts that appear, automatic emotional reactions that appear, that's the memory based intelligence of my body talking to me, the conscious self. And me as the conscious self also has my own understanding because I can reflect upon my thoughts and my emotions. So I use my conscious understanding to listen to my body's understanding, which comes from the past. And I can then decide, do I want to believe those thoughts to be true? Do I want to act upon it? And so on. So for me, we definitely do combine with this. But
okay.
then when I leave my body, the part of my personality based upon this lifetime goes away. So when I'm out of body, I feel more like the authentic me. This is why people often say, like when they have out of body experiences, it felt more real. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, because the container of your body wasn't influencing your total personality.
Right.
that part got away or disappeared when you left the body. So yeah, so for me, there's a personality that's like more like identified as who I am as a personal creator in the universe. And then there's also a memory-based identity that talks into our personality. It talks to our conscious mind while we're living. And then there's a third part, there's the higher mind. So for me, the memory-based conditioning is the subconscious mind because it's below our consciousness. For me, the conscious mind feels like it's predominantly in the face area, but it can expand as we awaken more. It does expand. The memory-based self is more in the physical body and in the lower four chakras. So it's a lower mind, a conscious mind, then a higher mind, which is above the crown chakra. And that I call like the future self or the universal self or my higher self. So at the most evolved experience in my own soul's journey, I've fully been God realized. That's the higher self talking back to me now, guiding me on my journey of awakening. So it's like there's three personalities all interacting in this human experience and also in the astral experience. Because even when we're out of body, there's still memory based upon past experiences, and there's still future guidance. In the astral, the memory is built into my energy body. It's not built into my physical body. So for me, like every dimension of change has past, present, and future. And every dimension of change has a memory understanding from past experiences. It's like the Akasha or the Akashic record. And then it also has a future-based experience. And that's what I imagine I want to become, or that's what I desire my future to become, or what I know is going to happen in the future. And then there's a present moment self or present moment experience.
What did you say? Every memory of change, or every, what did you just say?
Every dimension has
Dimension of change.
these three, yeah, because it has to have past, present, or future in order for it to create change. And so there's a memory of the past, and that's like called the Akasha, when it's usually referred to as a substance in the astral dimension or also in the physical dimension. And then in the body's representation of Akasha is the memory of the human body. The astral personalities aspect of Akasha is the memory of all of our lifetimes. And then in the deeper mental dimensions, time collapses. So there's less present or less future and less past, rather. And so there's less of an impression, but there's still a knowing of where we immediately came from. So when I'm in that dimension of oneness, that is just like me being an ocean of changing energy, there's not a strong remembrance of any individual experiences. It's like I only have short-term memory in that dimension, and it's a very short-term memory. Like I'm just perceiving enough to watch like green transform into blue. But if I start thinking about green again, then the blue turns back into green. So the short-term memory is like so shortly spaced away from the present moment that it's like just like an immediate recognition of moment to moment to moment to moment.
Yeah, that's what I've learned about time. So I like listening to Bashar in combination with you, because he really talks a lot about how reality is really structured. And actually, one thing you might be interested in, you'd have to watch the video because I can't fully explain it to you. But let me just pull this up. What he doesn't like, or he says that we kind of create, when we talk about the subconscious mind, we've kind of created this a shadow, and he said it's not to our benefit. Because he says that really what you want to do is go up. Let me just share this. This was in his 9 levels of consciousness talk. And so he said this is the structure of our experience. So it's the oversoul then creates the individual soul, which really is kind of like empty. And it's not until the soul has experiences that then you call that spirit. So spirit would be soul with all of the knowledge that it's gained from its experiences. But then from that, the higher mind is created. And then the template reality, which is what is the blueprint for physical reality. And then there's the collective mind that we have here on the physical level on Earth, and then the individual automatic mind. And then we have the three parts of the lower mind, which make up the ego, which is the physical mind, the unconscious physical mind, which are our beliefs, the physical mind and the subconscious, or the physical mind, the subconscious part, which is the emotions, and then the physical mind, the conscious part. So he says the lowest part is really the conscious mind. And that when if we want to start changing these, the subconscious and the beliefs, we really want to go up and not down. And that's when we, you see a lot of the drawings around what the subconscious is, and you'll see like there'll be like a glacier in water, and then the upper part is the conscious mind, and the lower part is the subconscious mind, right? The part beneath the water. And he said what we're doing there is we're creating the shadow that we don't need to create, and it makes people feel like they're scared to go into it, right? That they have to go deep, but really you want to go up. And when you do, you feel the lightness, but you also feel, the knowledge from the higher mind, which can more easily then transform these belief systems and then the emotions that go along with it. But I thought this might be interesting to you. He does a dialogue on this, and I don't know if you really watch him. Have you watched his?
No, I've only saw about 20 seconds of his video.
Oh, really? So he's got a lot on the website. But he usually does maybe it's about 10 to 15-minute monologue where he covers this, and then he does Q&A, which is really beautiful because he has a lot of dialogue with the Q&A, so you get a lot of back and forth between the person who's asking the question and him, and you learn a lot because a lot of us have the same kind of questions. But anyway,
if you leave it up for a moment, so I can place like my understanding, like the map that I built of reality, which uses the labels and maybe some of the definitions more from like India with the causal and astral and that, which I also consider like mental, emotional, and physical.
Yeah.
So the seventh density, the oversoul, I would call that like the first dimension, or even like the unmanifest, depending on how he describes it. So it would be like the Godhead or the unmanifest aspect of God. Then the individual soul would be what appears in this, like it appears at first in that first dimension of experience in which we're having all one light. And then the one recognizes itself. And in that experience, then would be number 3, the fifth density. So the one self exists, it only knows itself, but it doesn't reflect upon itself. So there's no understanding yet. As soon as the understanding I exist arises, then that's the higher mind, because it's the understanding built from the origin of creation, built from that unity state. And then once the mind starts to create a more expression, then it becomes that mental dimension, which would then be what you call template reality. And then within that expression as well, once there's a desire to become an interactive part of the universe, to experience self and other in a more complete way, then separate forms start appearing inside of our reality. And then that would be like a collective automatic mind and an individual automatic mind. So that's where we see the difference between the intelligence creating the environment or the game, and then ourselves as individuals playing within that game. So I would say 5 and 6 are like an astral dimension description. And then 7, 8, and 9 are all physical dimension descriptions. So for myself, actually, for me, what I see with the ego and the mind's intelligence is it's all spoken to us, to our consciousness. So I refer to consciousness as the I am. I refer to anything that automatically reacts from the body as part of the subconscious. And then the way I define the word unconscious is we're not aware of it. So unconscious means we're not aware of it. So that's why when he says beliefs are unconscious, that doesn't fit the way I define the English language. Unconscious means I'm not aware of it. And so but I'm aware of my beliefs. What I consider the unconscious are like the programs that structure the physical reality. Like, what's the intelligence that makes my heart beat? Like, I'm not aware of that. I don't tell my heart to beat, it beats on its own. So I'm not conscious of the instructions that tell my body to digest food and all those things.
Yeah,
So for
I
me,
understand.
the unconscious is very much a universal blueprint structure for physical matter. The subconscious is anything I've learned from the past, and the subconscious holds on to my beliefs, and then it speaks those beliefs to me through thoughts and emotions. And consciously, I just witness them. Consciously, I can work with my subconscious mind by using affirmation or visualization, any way that I can express my conscious belief as thought or emotion, including sound-based thought or picture-based thought, which is visualization. I then do that to reprogram my body's understanding, which essentially is that subconscious mind. So for me, I experience like we're number one, or we're number one at the seventh density. I don't know what he means by density unless he's referring to the chakras. But I'm essentially the original consciousness. And then as I desire more experience, I come into matter. I move towards matter. Because being in the physical reality is the most complex experience we've created thus far. So if I just want to be myself, I'm in the causal dimension. It's just me moving my understanding. There's no space. There's no different life forms I'm creating with. I'm in an ocean of my own creation. But
Which
then
would
as soon
be,
as I
you're
want to,
saying the soul, the sixth den.
yeah, that'd be like, yeah, one, two, and three together. And then as I want to become more complex, I want to create a personal expression and interact with other forms of personal consciousness that appear to be separate from me. Then one, two, and three pick up four, five, and six.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's all those existing together. So we never leave the original state. We just add on to it. And then as I want to experience an environment that holds on to itself, that's a more complex step. Then I enter into the physical universe and I pick up seven, eight, and nine. So if I'm in the astral dimension, I'm in like an open space with you, and our thought forms and our intention, our understanding is creating everything together. And if we stop focusing on it, it just starts disappearing. It doesn't hold itself in place the same way physical reality does. So physical reality is like we're creating with a third aspect of ourselves. There's self and other and universe. And the universe is like a personality now, meaning that the universe remembers and holds on to the creations. So physical matter lasts for millions of years, whether anybody is believing in it or not. It's like in the astral dimension, it's like a dream. If I stop believing in it, if I stop wanting it or participating with it, it starts evaporating. But
Well,
like
I think
I could
that's,
leave an object, you could
yeah.
leave an object in the woods and nobody knows it's there. And someone comes back a million years later and digs it up and discovers it. The universe held that creation in place. But in an astral dimension, if no one is putting energy into it, it starts to disappear from existence.
But that's actually what they're saying is happening here too. It's just that we don't believe that's happening, and therefore we experience
Yeah.
past in the present moment. But the present moment, we're actually bringing that there. So, like, if you have a photograph of something that happened in the past in the present moment, you're recreating that in the present moment.
I agree. So for me, you're recreating the idea of it and the emotion of it and all the beliefs that you have about it,
In the
you
present.
create again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And our records, like having photographs or books about history, they create it again in the present. So
Right.
we still are doing that. But then I also recognize that even you can walk into a location, like you can go to, like one time I went to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And if I didn't know there was a battle there, I would have still felt the energy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's like, for example, I was flying from Europe back to the United States, and the plane route went over Greenland and also yeah, went over Greenland, which is just all ice. And you're over the ocean, and you can feel what that's like. And I'm like 30,000 feet or even higher up in the air, and my window shade was drawn down. And at one point, I felt the energy change. And I felt like, oh, we're over a landmass. And I lifted up the window screen and I saw that we just started coming across the southernmost tip of Greenland. And we were only over it for maybe 3 minutes or so until it then left the plane's sight of vision and went past the tail of the plane. And so I knew that that was there, whether I had a belief about it. I had no idea we were going to fly over that mass of land. I didn't understand what was happening until I opened my window screen, but I knew because I could feel the energy there was a landmass. And I opened it up and I said, "Oh, it's all ice. It must be Greenland." And there's no homes or anything on there. So for me, like the world was still holding that form in existence, regardless of anybody believing about it or thinking about it or drawing on a map. But you're right, like the ideas and the behaviors and how we think and how we live, those have to get recalled through our memory, and then we create with them again in the world. Now,
Yes.
eventually, over time, the Earth's going to change and we're going to forget all the land masses, you know. So physical reality is still changing. It's not permanent. It just changes more slowly than the astral, than our ideas and our identity and all of this, because it's a slower vibrating God consciousness particle. Right? If everything's one particle, the physical dimension vibrates the slowest and vibrates quicker as you go back towards source, which means change happens faster.
Yeah, so I mean, based on what I've learned, I I would have thought that too, but now I don't believe that to be true. So the same part of me that gave me that experience, right, of turning into light being, I didn't consciously choose that, right? Like
Mhm.
Cat didn't consciously choose that. But that part of me, I believe, is guiding this whole experience until I wake up to that part. But I think, like in your case, that was also the part of you that's creating this journey, created that land, that transition from over that landmass, right? And you sensed it because you're in the physical reality, you're in the dream of Earth, and you're journeying. It feels like the physical body is journeying through Earth. But what's really happening, based on what I've learned, is it's our consciousness shining through these different frames of reality billions of times per second. And that's what's creating the feeling and the sensation of movement and
Yeah.
also the sensation of change, right?
Mhm.
So, and the way that I experience it, so that is a complete analogy. Bashar talks about that a lot. Do you want me to keep this up?
You can pull it down.
So the way I experience, um, so that's a complete analogy: the film strip, the projector light, and the film strip, right? And it's the movement of the film,
Mhm.
the frames being changed, that creates the motion on the screen,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I
So
understand.
what I experience, what I understand now that I was experiencing in those days after um, the Kundalini rising experience, as well as now, is um, so I can shift into a state where I start to see that the physical world is not as real. And it's not that I'm like there's a frame of reality, frame of reality, frame of reality. It's that they're all here right now. They're all here right now. And depending on how I feel, what solidifies, so it's kind of like all steam, you could say. And then whatever, depending on what resonates with me, how I feel inside, but really I'm the whole container, is what will then solidify as my physical world. But it's
Mhm.
all here right now. And
Mhm.
I think it's that, the until I wake up to it, it was that part of me that created that experience for me. And I think that's the same as what happened for you.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's definitely shared how I experience it. Like for me, everything's moving inside of me, but I don't move. So my intention, it's like I'm inside of a bubble, and on the interior of the bubble are the pictures of the world. Like that's an analogy. Like if I was sitting in the center of a fish tank, what's inside the fish tank is what I see as my experience. And so I'm always here, immovable. I'm the immovable self. But then the forms that I perceive moving are all created from my desire, including my desire to have a physical experience. That's what first created this existing. So, like, you're right. Like, I took from that infinite field of all that is, and I drew particles together and I built this dream of life that I want to be giving myself. And then I participate in the dream. Because I've witnessed things happening in this world that are undeniably just because of my creation.
Mhm.
Impossible things basically that have come together. And it was just my intention. And in some cases, I had the intention years earlier. And then something happens and I realize, whoa, like that's what I asked the universe for. That's what I wanted to experience in my life. And I didn't lift a finger to create it. And it just happened in the perfect time and way. And it happened exactly as I wanted it to happen years earlier. So for me, we're definitely are magnetizing like the particles together to build the journey of our life. And it's all happening inside of our own bubble of
Yeah,
perceptual awareness.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, great. Cool. It's been really fun to find that the science is there to explain all of this too.
Mhm.
Um, okay, so one of the things that I've really wanted to ask you about is um, you in a couple of meditations, and one in particular, you brought us down, like you had us like sense and feel the crown area, and I feel like you said that that was the I am state. Yeah, and then you also
Yeah. Yeah. It's a, yeah, without trying to limit it to a chakra. So in this human personality, the different chakras are the manifestation of greater aspects of ourselves. So, like the I am state can't be localized to just a little energy place. But when we go into that little energy place, we connect into the fullness of the I am state. And
okay.
so we start to perceive more of that here in our human reality.
Okay. And so how so that can also be accessed in the heart.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
So for me, like a big purpose for my lifetime is to get that oneness energy and to shine it here in the physical world more. So it's like I'm bringing that original love and light of God energy into this physical reality. And that's very much what I teach, where you want to try to feel your spiritual heart all the time and you want to try to be in that energy and understanding.
Yeah.
So I'm bringing something here into creation just because I want to particularize it or magnetize the particles together. And I want to experience a life that has these qualities. And
Yeah.
we're God, so we can create anything.
Yeah.
The big like trick or trap is we forgot that we're these powerful, creative, godlike beings.
Yeah.
And so we think we're a reaction instead of a creation.
Yeah. Well, the way that Bashar puts that is that, so he says that we come here to master limitation. So someone
Mm.
asked him one time in one of the talks that, do you guys think that we're just kindergartners here? And he said, absolutely not. He said, you are masters and you came here to master limitation so that you could be masters of limitation. He said, but a soul that comes here is not a, um, an immature soul, because
Mm.
this is one of the realities that has the highest degree of complexity
Mm.
and also violence too, which I thought was fascinating. That he said that of
Yeah.
all the, because he's what they call a first contact specialist, and so he travels around the universe or the multiverse, approaching or studying societies, especially the ones that resonate with their vibration. And so he said that the Earth is, and he's visited, I think he said like 137 at the time, planetary systems. And he said ours is one of the most challenging and the most violent
Mm.
societies.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, because I look at violence just as intense creative desire.
Mhm.
If someone gets violent, they're fighting for their survival. It's the strongest expression of physical energy. Fighting for your life is the strongest expression of energy for any mammal or any animal, including human. So it is intense desire. And so that desire just gets channeled with intense fear.
Mhm.
And it's based upon, fear of non-existence, fear of death. But
Mhm.
very much so, I agree. This is an incredibly complex experience. It's like when you dream at night or if you go to the astral, it's so easy to create whatever you want. And when you come to the earth experience, it's so much more difficult because we're all co-creating it together. And that does impose limitation on us. And it's through those limitations that we learn more. It's through challenge that we awaken, especially in these deepenings of, these amazing qualities like compassion and wisdom and confidence, peace and ease and trust.
Hmm.
Yeah, this is a very challenging place. I think it's unfortunate that, a lot of the original or the ancient spiritual traditions colored it differently. This is the purgatory, and this is like where you're meant to like be tried or suffer, and you're being punished. You got thrown out of the, Eden, the Garden of Eden, or the kingdom of heaven, or life is just suffering and you have to just try to get away from it. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of pain-based explanations, I feel, that aren't based upon wisdom and awakening, but rather separation, denial, and avoidance. And a lot of people are struggling with life because they've historically been taught these ideas. And so they think there's something wrong with me, there's something wrong with life. Life is difficult, so I must be wrong or bad. And instead of embracing the opportunities to learn and awaken, we actually shun away from them and maintain that state of separation and suffering.
Hmm. But I think that's really, part of the reason we come here is to have that experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? Of not knowing that we are in God, the mind and heart of God,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so by having that experience, we know more of who we are, because the way we experience time here is not really accurate. That's not really how we experience time outside of here.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, for me, time's not a static thing. Time's a measurement of change. And it's very much like based upon my perception. So I can actually perceive time flying when
mhm,
I'm really enjoying life and I forget about myself. The more I forget about my human identity, the faster time seems to happen. But if I'm like in an experience I don't want to live in, I'm in my thoughts, I'm thinking about my story, I'm thinking about myself, and it drags out for a long time. So time is very much perceptual. And I think the fallacy is we believe that time is determined from a power outside of us. Like I can manifest things instantly. It doesn't matter if someone else says no, it takes, a month to get $1 million. It's like, no, I can manifest $1 million tomorrow if I know how to put myself into a state of alignment to create that experience. So there's an aspect of allowance, there's an aspect of knowing, a desire, we're definitely participatory creators. So
yeah.
there's an education, I think, that we're taught how long it takes things to appear in time, and that imposes a lot of limitation. Whereas when we're creators and we understand we're creating with an infinite substance in this universe, then time is no longer a factor. Like I never think about how long it's going to take. I just go on the journey of creating it, and I understand it's going to happen when it's able to. And the better I can perform my role as a creator of this experience, the faster it'll appear.
Mhm. Yeah,
Mhm.
trusting. I think trusting, you've talked about that a lot, is a big one. And
Mhm.
energetically, I can feel it, because if the physical world, not if, but the physical world is a mirror of who we are, of what our beliefs are, right? So it's going to show us what we believe. And if I believe that it is, if I understand that it's that, and I trust it, I trust that what I want to happen will happen, then that my energy opens up, and that frees the physical world to actually show me. But if I don't trust, then it's the reflection is going to be one of not trust, right?
Mhm.
Me not trusting, which means it doesn't appear.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because your trust is like the glue that holds things together. Like
Hmm.
a child trusts the father, for example, so to hold the father's hand. The child's afraid to walk across a road, the father will say, no, it's safe here, follow me. The child will trust the dad and go with it. So if we trust the universe to work with us, we stay connected to the universe, and then our communication can flow properly. So the universe receives our message, we receive the universe message. Our understanding is transmitted better. We have intuition guiding us from the universe as well. Our energy's connected. Yeah, for me, trust is a very, very important part of building anything. You can't
Hmm.
build a relationship if you don't have trust. You can't even have a job if you don't have trust. If you're showing up for your job knowing that they're going to pay you, you have to trust that at the end of the work week, you're going to get paid. Otherwise, you're not going to show up at the beginning of the
Yeah.
work week to do your job.
Yeah.
So, like every experience has that connection quality.
Hmm.
We have to trust. And it's difficult when there's deception and lies and trickery, because that gets us then to lose trust in people or in society. And then we stop participating. So
Hmm.
it's by design. Like if you want to crash a country, Like you just put a bunch of liars as the politicians and government officials, because then the people lose faith, they lose hope, they lose interest, they lose desire. Because if you start telling yourself, well, it's not going to work out anyway, like why should I even do it if in the end they're lying to me and they're not going to give me what I want? You'll lose trust, you'll stop participating, and then you'll stop competing with them and they'll have absolute authority.
Mhm.
And if you look around the world, that's what so many of these low quality governments have been doing. You know, they lie to you, they give you empty promises, and then, yeah, it just all falls apart and people start giving up and start feeling hopeless.
Yeah, that was really a timely, exactly what you were
Yeah,
saying.
yeah,
So
we see it.
timely.
It's a strategy.
Yeah.
And that's what I think sometimes people don't understand is they think, oh, they're doing their best. You know, these politicians are doing their best. And it's like, no, they're purposefully lying to you. They're purposefully choosing to create distractions. They're purposefully choosing to do all this. And most people don't understand it's actually by design, because if you read historically, these different political strategies, Machiavellian politics, and the history of Nazi Germany and communism and all of these, even other governments, you know, long ago, if you want to control the people, there's a certain set of like rules you have to follow as a government to maintain authority.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, so it's happening right in front of our eyes. And there's a reason why they want us to forget about human history, because then we can't catch them in their game,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, because it keeps happening.
Yeah. It keeps happening until we stand up and say no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to stand up for human rights and
Yeah.
our liberties, because that's what it all comes down to is personal liberty. You know, and that's why I think the Constitution is like the greatest government document, at least that I've ever found, because it's all about personal liberty and it's about no government having control over your individual rights and freedoms as a human being.
Mhm.
And that Constitution is the threat of every type of power-hungry government. And that's why they've always tried to destroy it.
Mhm.
You know, and you can look back. I mean, we don't hear this unfortunately in most school books, but if you read history books and you read like newspaper articles, and even some authors have done a wonderful job of putting it all together, you realize that there's always been, since the beginning of the creation of the United States, different groups of people trying to destroy the US and take control over it. Like, I think the United States has had like I think it was five different national currencies promoted
Oh,
until
really?
the current one we have from the Federal Reserve System. And every time the United States government, the congressmen and the senators, they denied a national currency because they realized it would mean the fall of the entire democracy of the United States. And
Yeah.
that's why then the Federal Reserve was created. They had to do it during a vacation period in the government when most people weren't there to vote on it. And they slipped it in this, you know, trickery, this way with trickery. And now we have a currency in which all the banks are collapsing because it was built on a set of banking rules that was designed to collapse from the very beginning it was created.
Yeah. Yeah. My good
Yeah.
friend just wrote a book about that, Kristen Ragusin. It's called The End of
Mm,
Scarcity. And
mm.
she takes you through all of that about money and the
Yeah.
history of
Yeah,
money.
it's designed that way. Yeah. And but it also shows us, because I think everything serves our highest good. It shows us what's actually valuable, and what's valuable is each other. You
Mhm.
know, we're desiring money to buy plastic toys and shiny objects, when
Mhm.
what we should be doing is valuing our friendships and valuing our community and valuing our children. Like this whole upheaval happening right now is steering us back to focus on what always been the most important part of the human experience, which
Yeah.
is living from our heart and living with each other in cooperation.
Yeah.
So it's all in alignment. It's just the universe is correcting the ship again.
Yeah. Yeah. I was in New York during 9/11, so I went through that whole experience. I actually flew that morning. I was flying out of Newark to Ronald Reagan. So I landed right when the Pentagon got hit. And and anyway, that whole experience showed me how much like sometimes these traumatic events and natural disasters are really God just trying to get us to go back to what we were supposed to be doing. Because after that time, everyone in New York was so friendly to each other, and people were coming from all over, bringing clothes because they thought that there'd be a lot of people coming out of ground zero, which there really wasn't. But there was all these people gathering and like bringing food and bringing clothes and just holding doors open for each other. No one did that in New York, and so it really made everybody feel at one or close again, and compassionate
Mhm.
with each other. And yeah, so I really feel like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, because there's light inside of every dark experience,
Mhm.
and sometimes in our own personal lives, we think that the most difficult experiences are like going to be the worst, but
Mhm.
they're actually the most rewarding. Like we learn the most, we come closer together. Sometimes like in a fight in a relationship or the breakup of a relationship, like we actually come closer together because we can start to understand each other more.
Mhm.
In the pain of separation, you need to learn so you can get back together.
Yeah.
You need to understand your partner and fix the problems. So in these great states of suffering, we do emerge in higher states of knowledge and happiness if we just allow ourselves to go through those experiences.
Mhm. Yeah, it's really beautiful.
Um,
If we can view it that way.
that's the challenge.
Yeah.
And you always
So
see it from a higher place.
I wanted to touch on again, we kind of digressed from talking about like going through that process
Mhm.
of the chakra system, but it's okay. I just wanted to kind of get your, have you talked a little bit about how the chakras are the blueprint for our experiences? And then also, I want to talk about what unity consciousness means to you. And then I do want to ask you about the spiritual heart. So, my curiosity around the spiritual heart is like, how did you discover it? Did you read about it first and then just started going into your heart? Or did it naturally occur to you?
Okay. So for me, it happened through me naturally as I was teaching. So the first time I heard the word spiritual heart, literally that word, was during the 99 days, 99 channels. So that was, I think, like 2007 or 2008, one of those 2 years. And when it came through, I was a little bit surprised by it because for me, being a student of Zen, I was always emphasizing just the space of awareness and the emptiness quality, but not the emptiness that's based on separation, instead the emptiness that's holding all of life. So that was most important in my understanding. And then when I started channeling this higher intelligence, started emphasizing the center of you, and it's the creative energy of love, and we have to integrate the energy of life with the emptiness, and that gives us the full experience. You can't just focus on being nothing. You have to focus on understanding what nothing is like and understanding what everything is like. So emptiness and form, or emptiness and creative energy. So that first started coming through me in 2007 or 8, and that's when I first understood what it is now that I teach about. There was a reference, like for me when I was growing up, for me, like Jesus was always like living from his heart, right? And so I understood like the power of love, and I put together, and I don't know if it's exactly written this way, because someone asked me like, what Bible verse does it come from? And like, I can't recite any Bible verses.
Yeah.
Uh, and so for me, I always understood that like the kingdom of heaven is within the heart. And like I think he said like those who are pure of heart enter the kingdom of heaven. And so that was like my understanding of the significance of the heart, but I never really worked with it or embraced it because again I was really practicing Zen, which was devoid of any talk about the heart. And then at one point, I did come across Ramana Maharshi reference that the I thought of the mind begins on the right side of your chest.
Mhm.
But he never talked about it as having bliss or love or any of that. He just said that or the beginning of himself is begins in his chest as the I thought. And when people ask him, "Who are you?" you point to your chest always. So there was that reference point, but for me, that wasn't the same as like I experienced the spirit heart in the middle, and then I feel it expanding to experience, or I experience it expanding to fill everything with that quality of energy and myself being it.
Mhm.
So even though those were like the different reference points, and then Yogananda, I read Paramahansa Yogananda a lot, and he talked about devotion and love. But I always understood that as being emotional. And I thought the Jesus description of the heart was also emotional. And then Ramana Maharshi was very mental and very dry and just being the witness and having it, reside on the right side of your chest. So for me, it was different. And for a little while, my mind like didn't understand how to place it. But then the more I taught about it and the more I experienced it, because I was just channeling it through. So I was being shown like what is meant by the spiritual heart. And
Wow.
that's when like the white light started appearing, and I saw the whole room is white light. And that happened like every day for maybe like 20 days in a row when I did the channeling. About like 2/3 of the way through or halfway through, that just started becoming the experience. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, that was really my real reference. And then over the years of doing all these teachings, it just kind of evolved itself as more descriptions came in. It kind of formed an understanding of what the higher self means by the spiritual heart.
When I first started going there from you, um, it was kind of me looking down and feeling it, and then I started learning eventually to drop myself into it and become it. And then
Mhm.
it just really started to explode.
Yeah, yeah,
And
exactly.
and then I started realizing this was probably like maybe 8, 9 months ago. Then it would start happening. It's on its own. It was like a flame just going on its own. Like I didn't even necessarily have to intend. It would just start. And it was just like, wow. And then I noticed that I had this picture of Jesus in my room. So when in the Philippines, I also grew up Catholic, but I kind of joke that I'm glad I never really paid attention in church because I didn't have to unlearn a lot of things that religion teaches you. I guess I wasn't paying attention. So I didn't have a lot of like, you know, limitations imposed on me with religion. My mom wasn't really, she was more spiritual than religious, I would say. But when in the Philippines, when people die, they're very religious there. They give you these like hard cards. They're like hard paper or hard cover cards, and they're pictures of like Mary and Jesus or and one of Jesus. And I kept one from my mom's death. I got a lot of them, but I kept one after she died, and it was a really beautiful picture of Jesus, almost kind of with blondish hair, which I haven't really seen. But he had the halo, and then he also had this picture of a heart here with a flame,
Mhm.
and I never really noticed that part of it until that happened to me when all of a sudden it just was like this light going off, this flame. And it feels to me like it goes this way in
Mhm.
this direction. It kind of goes up and
Yeah.
out. It doesn't feel like
Mhm.
it goes down for me.
Mhm.
Um, but I think it is spherical. I don't
Mhm.
know.
Yeah, try to feel your root chakra while you're feeling your spiritual heart,
Yeah.
because a lot of people have learned to not feel their lower three chakras, because that's even their heart chakra as well, but mainly the lower three, because that has a lot of psychological conditioning from our past that has conflict and suffering and that. And most people usually hang out up here and then
Mhm.
they ignore down there.
Yeah.
So the spiritual heart usually almost always is felt as this rising up energy. But if we just put attention onto our root chakra at the same time, we'll notice that that life force energy of our heart goes down to the base of our Kundalini system. And then it starts to awaken and purify the root chakra, which has our deepest human identity, our deepest fears, the issues of trust, like we were talking about.
Yeah.
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 So beautiful practice is feel your crown, your root, and your spiritual heart, and just feel all three positions. Don't try to connect anything. Don't try and do anything. Just feel those three, and you'll notice your whole Kundalini channel gets activated from your heart's energy. And it's
Yeah.
real powerful.
Yeah. I've done that a lot too.
Mhm.
Yeah. Learning it from you. Um, and that was one of the big takeaways from our experience together, as well as what's her name, Sue Morter, Dr. Sue Morter. Are you familiar with her?
I really don't know much people.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah, I don't really read much or
she wrote
watch
a
much
book
video.
called Energy Codes, which is
Okay.
really good. And she really emphasized that it's really the energy that does the work, right?
Mhm.
And so that's really what I noticed too with the work that we were doing, like going into the chakras. Not You don't have to have information. I mean, sorry,
Mhm.
affirmations. It's just taking your awareness into the chakra, and like just by you bringing your awareness there, like you can feel the energy start to build in the chakras, and you start to develop an understanding of the qualities of them. And what I learned from that is so this is kind of one of the questions I wanted to ask you, but I'll just share with you what I learned from my experience with your class, your group, is just bringing our awareness in there. One, it's like like you say, it's like sticking your hand in the glove, right? The glove is just going to sit there if you don't do anything. But if you want it to move, or you want to learn more about how to use it, you got to stick your hand in the glove to like wake it up. And when I started going into my chakra system, and I could really feel the different qualities of the different chakras. And then I really started to understand, based on the work with you, is that it's the qualities of these chakras that's going to determine what shows up in the physical world.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think that eventually, I think, this guy, Robert Grant, the work that he's doing in mathematics, I really believe that he'll actually be able to decode the frequencies in the chakras and how they correlate with the experiences in the physical world. I really
Mm.
think he'll
So
be able to.
you think it can be reduced down to numbers?
Yeah, I think everything can be reduced down to numbers. He describes math as really the language in which God wrote the
Mhm.
universe.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, for me, the chakra system is like an interface. So our astral body consciousness, our like, soul personality, it plugs into the physical body. And when it does that, this web of energy is created, and that's the chakra system. So the chakras overlay different organs in your body, and they have similar functions, similar chemical functions as those emotions do. So a physiologist or a brain scientist, they will, or a chemist, they will measure the emotions as, chemicals, hormones, basically. But emotionally, they're vibrations.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a correlation there.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's definitely true for me that your vibration, your emotional feelings, they shape the quality of your expression. And it's a vibrational language. And if you just look at human beings, it's like right there in front of us. A lot of times when we like read these spiritual concepts, it seems like very mysterious and like shocking.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just observe life, which is why I don't read a lot of books, because I like life to teach me. That's just what I enjoy. I don't think there's anything wrong with reading. I think you can accelerate your growth definitely by reading and by learning from others. That's why I'm a teacher. But for me, I really like embrace life. I love to participate and explore my life. So the easiest example is like a happy person is very magnetic. So if you go into like a restaurant or a place where a lot of people are at, you'll always notice the happiest people. And you can't help but like looking at them and being curious, like, what are they talking about? And if you're
Yeah.
an outgoing person, like wanting to like walk up and talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
So in that higher vibration of love and happiness and celebration for life, you draw things to you.
Mm-hmm.
And someone who's depressed makes everyone uncomfortable, and you don't want to notice them. You want to look away, and so it's like, yeah, and a low vibrational energy, automatically you want to distance yourself from, and a high vibrational energy, automatically you want to move towards.
Mm-hmm.
So the higher your frequency of happiness and love and confidence and joy and celebration, the more you will magnetize to yourself whatever it is you're focusing on or whatever it is you're desiring. So there's a quality of higher vibration and a strength of higher vibration that determines this magnetism, but then it's our understanding that instructs the universe what to bring to us. So
Mm-hmm.
I know some people who are very, very happy, but they have a difficult time choosing what they want. And they don't really get what they want unless they form a specific idea. And then I've watched it happen really fast. Like someone says, oh, I want this. Like I want to go like to a tropical island. This is a true story. It just happened in a friend of mine's life. I want to go to a tropical island, and this person's really happy and like good positive energy all the time. And they know a lot about manifestation, but usually they're not really clear about what they should be doing. But they like, I just want to go to a tropical island. And sure enough, it manifests that they get an all expenses paid trip to a tropical island. And it just kind of lands in their lap. And it's like, wow, this is amazing. And then they also wanted to go to Paris. They were talking about Paris a lot and how much they love Paris. I'd love to go there. Well, it turns out that right after the tropical island, they took a plane directly to Paris. Again, that was all paid for.
Oh my God.
So it happened automatically. But the challenge of this person sometimes, because they're so emotional, like they feel so much, they sometimes have difficulty using their logical mind because more of themselves is in that emotional center, that emotional body. But once they choose something, it happens because they're already in such a strong current of energy. And sometimes in our lives, we get stuck with making choices because we overthink it. And we try to find like the best thing or the right thing rather than just asking ourselves, what is the thing I would like to experience?
Yeah.
And when we just let it be a preference, we stop resisting it because of fear of doing something wrong. We just want to enjoy it, then it happens very quickly as long as we're staying in these higher states of vibration.
Yeah, that's that trust thing
Yeah.
again. And I
Yeah.
guess that's why I want to write the book, is because I think that when people understand how it works, they'll trust more.
Mhm.
I mean, that's what it
Yeah.
took for me.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you need real information in order to build your understanding with. That's
Mhm.
why we want to seek out other people's experiences and understand how they experience reality, because it's information that gets us to trust in that knowledge for ourselves.
Mhm.
You know, we are communal creatures. Since the beginning of modern time, we've always communicated and shared understandings with each other. And that's why we've created such amazing advancements in all the different sciences. So it is very important that, yeah, we do share information, we do communicate, and then we validate the information, because it might not be apparent always why the information is being used. Like I'll try and think of an example, but like my reason for believing an idea might be different than your reason. And so there can be a little bit of a confusion about it. Um, Yeah, usually it's just like there's misunderstandings that sometimes happen in like relationships where we think they meant this and we go
Yeah.
along with their suggestion and turns out it was something other than we thought it was. So there's a lack of communication, there's a lack of clarity about what things mean.
Mhm.
But we still trusted in it and thus we were able to cooperate and create it.
Mhm.
So we have to observe our experiences to learn what that information means, and then we'll develop more trust in what that thing is,
Yeah.
because some people lose trust when they like trust the wrong people, or they have a friend who like knows that if I tell you what it really is, you won't go along with me. So I'll like kind of color it a little bit and then you'll go along with me. And then at the end, you'll be disappointed because you know I misled you. And
Mhm.
so people like lose trust in society, trust in relationships, trust in each other because the other person is afraid to communicate it because they know the other person won't like it, or they're deceptive, manipulative, or they're just afraid to communicate because of their own insecurity and rejection. But a lack of communication is a lack of sharing of information, and that breaks down trust.
Yeah. So what I notice, especially with the spiritual heart, which I want to ask you one more question about, around how did you understand that that spiritual heart energy was creating the material world? So I want to understand that.
Yeah.
But before we go there, what I realized is when I'm not trusting. So if and I do believe this energy is creating the world, the physical world, um, and the physical world is actually not as physical as we think. It's just right, not as real as we think. It's just our experience of it. It's like a dream. But what I notice is when I'm not trusting, that stops. That flow of energy,
Mhm.
like it gets held back, which then also reduces, because time and frequency, or time and frequency are, or time and gravity, because gravity is a function of frequency, is slowed,
Mhm.
right? So if
Yeah.
I'm not believing, then I'm not allowing that experience, right? I plug up the spiritual heart, so to speak, that slows time down. So I experience more time and the physical world feels more dense and real, right? And so things don't manifest as quickly because I'm not allowing that energy to flow.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because we're using our heart's energy as our creative energy. And if I have a mental reason why I shouldn't create this, then I will, turn off my creative energy flow. So the challenge in our life is trying to navigate an experience by continuing to focus on where to direct our energy rather than stopping and starting it. It's just where can I direct it? So you can become like a constant fluid creative experience and just move towards what you want and away from what you don't want instead of like shutting it off and then feeling stuck or waiting.
Mhm.
So there's a different way like the mind works. So it's really the human mind governs the connection of the spiritual heart energy into the world. And if your mind's understanding, just changes its shape a little bit, then you can always feel like you're connected into life and creating.
So when you had that realization that the energy from the spiritual heart is what's creating the universe, was that channeled through you, or did you have that realization on your own?
The first one time when it was really big was when I was like 22, was in 2004. And that was like the experience I told you. I was really tired and I just laid down in my bed and I went there. When I came back, my heart energy was so incredibly strong. It was so powerful and it felt like I was just shining everything. And that's when I knew experientially that everything begins as the white light and the white light shining from my heart. And then to solidify that personal understanding, there was one book called The Tibetan Dream Yoga. I found it at a Sedona Public Library. And I probably found it around that time, because I was living at that same place then. But a little later, because when I just got to Sedona, I did the meditating, and this happened after I lived there a while. And there was a Tibetan yoga practice, a dream yoga practice that talked about the white light being in the heart. And so that was a good confirmation for me, because oftentimes that would happen. I'd have an experience or I'd have an idea, and then the universe would somehow confirm it for me because I wanted to know, is this accurate? So
Yeah.
it would show up that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's happening for me all the time now.
Yeah.
But
And
how
then,
did you know? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
when you're in the energy, you know what it is. That's like the best way to describe it. It's like if you eat an apple, you know it's food for your body because it gives your body energy. So when you're experiencing that place, you know that that's the original creative energy of your reality or of yourself. But then when I came back into the physical world, that energy became the physical world. It's like the white light faded and the forms of the physical world appeared. And then I realized my eyes were closed and I opened them. And so there's that experience. Yeah, it's very much like an overlapping experience. It's like when I would channel and everything goes white, or in meditation, everything goes white. It's like they're filling the same space and they overlap each other. So it's not like a time-based creative process. Like we often think of the Big Bang as something that happened millions of years ago, and then through time it happened. The spiritual heart is not something that happened through time and then stopped happening like the Big Bang. Rather, it's like the field of your consciousness is energy all the time. And then your intelligence from your deepest personal mind state, like your soul state, that then changes that energy. So instead of it being a oneness energy, now it becomes whatever you're understanding. So the white light becomes all the colors and all the space and all the forms and all the emotions and all the ideas. So that energy is always creating your experience. We're just using that energy and reshaping it in every moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what's creating, then manifesting the
Mm-hmm.
physical world, right?
Yeah.
And so in that way, like the physical world is not, again, back to that real thing.
Not real.
Yeah, it's a projection of that,
Yeah,
right?
it
And
is.
each and
Yeah.
every moment, it's a projection. And yeah, and then that's what that Robert Grant talked to. He talks about how that the math of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I won't go into it because we've been on for a long time and I don't want to take your whole day, but he talks about he shows the math and the physics of all of that, and that it's really how we experience time is a measure, again, like you were saying, about it's really about belief and our perception.
Mm-hmm.
So but I do want to talk about the dream really quick, because you just talked about the Tibetan dream yoga book. Is that right? Was that?
Yeah, I think that's what it's called, Tibetan Dream Yoga.
Yeah. So what I really want to do, and what I've always tried to, or the downloads that I always get are around anything that I'm doing, is how can I explain this in a way that people will get it, right? Because it seems really complex, but it's actually really simple. And the way that I understand it, it's really every reality is a dream. It's all really a dream. It's not as physical, like our world. It seems very physical. It's not as physical. And when you're in a dream at night, when you sleep and you're in a dream, your dream self think you're the dream self. And the physical, everything that you experience in the dream, the forms of the dream, like the objects in the dream, the people in the dream, and even the empty space in the dream, are all illusions occurring in your awareness, right? And it's only when you wake up out of that dream that you realize, oh, that was a dream, right? And so so that's one thing appearing as many. Your mind appearing as many, that's Maya. One thing appearing as many, and it's an illusion. And that's what this reality is too. Now, in terms of creation, like what we were talking about, the spiritual heart creating your experience, shining through the chakras, basically, which is your belief systems. So when we're in this physical world, because of the collective consciousness and the belief systems we've adopted, the memory-based condition that we've adopted from this experience, we have resistance to creating what we want because we don't believe, for whatever reason, feeling unworthy, not believing it's even possible, that all those beliefs are inhibiting that experience from happening. But when you explain to people that it's all just a dream, and imagine that when you're dreaming at night, when you dream at night, lucid dreaming, for example, when people wake up in their dreams and they know that they can create whatever they want in the dream, they have no resistance to it because it's a dream. But when they think of themselves in the physical world because they think it's real, right? They think it's more real than it actually is. They don't understand that it's also a dream. Now the resistance comes back. So I love that explanation because I feel like when you teach people, when they have that understanding, they can go, oh, I see. It's like I hold these belief systems. You explain to them what the chakra system is and how that's like inhibiting that flow of energy, right? And if they can just keep feeling themselves and, working on those belief systems and then keep feeling themselves as that white light, then they'll, over time, gradually release that resistance.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Does that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great way to jumpstart people's, progress.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's lots of different strategies, but that's a very effective one, and it shortcuts the time that's needed. Essentially, if we know we are creators, like that's the biggest transformative idea I think a person can embrace. If you know you're a creator, because once you accept the idea you're a creator, you give yourself permission to participate in life. And that's a big struggle that people have, especially in the beginning of the awakening process, is they don't let themselves participate because the world has taught them, we don't care what you think. We don't want to know what you think. Just do what you're told. And so people have been conditioned in this world to do others' will rather than do their own will. And even in religion, they talk about God's will, but usually God's will is the religious idea of what you should be doing. It's not actually what God wants you to do.
Yeah.
So we're so heavily conditioned to not be in touch with our own creative willpower and to recognize like how powerful we are in our realities. So just giving someone permission to go try, to go do, just be yourself, express yourself, that unlocks all this creative energy. Mm-hmm. And then it's like what you said, the next thing is, just recognize that you can create what you want and you don't have to focus on removing anything. You don't have to do any healing work or any cleanup work. As long as you know you're a creator and you stay connected to what you want to create, all your energy is going there and you're going to start building the new experience. And then through the process of building it, you're going to show yourself that you don't have to be afraid, or you don't have to be ashamed of yourself, or you don't have to be shy or embarrassed. So as you just follow your heart's desire and let yourself express, automatically that experience is going to be teaching you to understand yourself in a new way and in a healthier way. And then that's going to give you this self-transformation without needing to uncover your past and heal any parts of yourself.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. I really appreciated one of I don't know if it was the Source Light video. It's in the Mind Mastery series where basically you talked about the energy coming all the way down into the root. And that is the surrender state. When you just surrender, then that energy can come all the way down and you really don't have any fear. And it's just the energy that did the work. You didn't have to even change your mind about anything. You just had to, the only thing you had to change your mind around was just to let go and relax, totally surrender. That's it. Just like, even just for a moment, just to feel that, letting the energy flow. And like some people, I think, like I can feel it go all the way down, but I don't know that everybody has that ability to sense the energy, but they will feel the effect, I think. Or do you think that maybe it won't be able to flow all the way down in certain people?
Everybody can do it because I feel it's part of the design of the human energy body. So for myself, the way I understand it, and this is just again observing it, is the creative energy of our expression begins at our root chakra, and then it flows up through the system and then out. And when we observe something, it flows in through the brain center, the Ajna chakra, and then down to the root, which is the base of our psyche. So there's this inward flow of coming in and down when we receive, and an upward flow of going up and out when we express. If someone's holding on to stress, like anxiety or fear or nervousness, they're expressing that understanding of resistance and nervousness. So they're not actually relaxing, they're not surrendering.
Yeah.
So the reason why the energy doesn't flow down is because in that moment they're expressing and understanding up. So the upward movement overrides the downward movement. So how can you relax so completely that you don't try to do anything, that you don't resist anything, that you don't think of anything? And in that case, then you stop expressing from the root up, and now the energy can naturally be given to you and come down with it. So a lot of it is people don't know how to relax. And in the beginning of learning meditation, it's very much just a relaxation exercise until then the energy can connect. And then you start noticing deeper states of change. And then that higher frequency will evolve all the parts of your psyche.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so I guess maybe lastly, I'd just like to ask you about what you would say about unity consciousness, what that is to you.
Well, everything is one. So for me, unity consciousness is just recognizing the oneness. So it starts as an idea, like anything does. And the more we honor that idea as truth, then the more we start noticing evidence of that idea as truth. So as you then just continue to honor that idea, you start to feel connected, you start to see the connections, you start to notice how the different dimensions of mind, emotion, and create into the body and the world. So unity consciousness is really just evolution of awakening. So rather than it being a yes or a no, it's really a progression, just like awakening and enlightenment is. You know, someone might say, yeah, I believe in unity consciousness, but that's just, do you believe in the idea? Like that's just the start. That's the first touching of the energy. But then experience builds the understanding and builds the energy, and the energy is actually blissful oneness. So we're all like on the spectrum of unity consciousness. Like how fully are we awakened into the experience of oneness? So for me, it's the evolution of the soul. You know, what we are is individual points of consciousness. And when we return to the source or the first dimension of creation, we realize everything was always one. And then that's this explosion of bliss. Then you come back into all the separate forms and you realize everything was one from the start. I just didn't know it. And then you try to live with that understanding and that energy as much as you can. So you keep bringing more of that bliss into your human life.
So when I think my evolution with this concept was that, yeah, we're all one. We're all part of Earth, right? So we're all one human species inhabiting Earth. So it's just this idea that, yeah, we're all one. And then when I started working with you and understanding that I'm not just a physical human body, I mean, I kind of had that idea before, but to start to experience myself as a body of consciousness, right? So we're bodies of consciousness. Now, everything I see, so just like the dream is many things appearing, separate forms appearing as, one thing, appearing as separate forms. And even the space is all one thing. And so when I look out now, and I know this is a dream too, right? So even this empty space is actually the mind of God. And the physical forms, all of us are too. We're all God. But so again, one thing appearing as many, right? Many things, separate forms appearing as one thing. But what happens when I really do that, when I really sense and feel and understand and look around and know that this is all happening inside of me, I start to feel the space vibrate. I start to feel the forms. I don't feel like they're me yet, right? Like I don't feel like I'm inside the cabinets. I don't feel that, but I feel like I feel closer to everything and closer to everyone. And it is like kind of a surrender feeling. You relax because you're no longer afraid of things. And as soon as you're afraid of things, you create that separation again. So that separation back is ego consciousness or human consciousness, separation consciousness. But also there's also it's the idea that all frequencies are God. God is the all that is. And so that means all frequencies are God. High and low frequencies are all God. And they're all available. Now, whether we choose to align to something is up to us, right? So, but that frequency has the right to exist. And when I embrace that concept, then you feel again more wholeness. So you feel more oneness, you feel more complete again. And I feel like that's where we have to go. Like that's where we are going. I don't think that's where we have to go, but I think that's the trajectory that most of us are on. But what's interesting to me about that is the fact that I feel the physical world differently. And I feel like that is what Jesus knew, experienced all the time. And I also feel like that's how he was able to manipulate the physical reality, right? Because when you realize that more and more and you have the experience of, there may be a point, I am not there, but when you understand that you are everything that in front of you, that you're experiencing, then there might be a way. Well, then you have more control. Eventually, I think I'll have more control over how it's all working, right? So like, how did he, I guess one of the things that I'm still trying to like understand is how did he walk on water and how did he change all of these things? And I guess it could be just the belief, the knowledge that he could, like, not just an idea, not just as a concept. He knew that he could. He really understood what things were. And so he could make it manifest like that. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't know what Jesus's experience was. So, I wasn't necessarily there to witness it. But I know from my own experience that the more I do recognize that I'm communicating with the universal intelligence, that's how I understand it. The more I recognize that I'm always interfacing with the mind of God, the more easily things do manifest. And they manifest in more specific ways. And for me, it's undeniable. Some people would say, well, how do you know if it wasn't just chance that it happened or it wasn't going to happen anyway? It's like, no, not like this. Like I have concrete examples that were very, very definite. And I enjoy that. So for me, there's been a process of cultivating more of that understanding you've talked about and trying to live within it and like participate in life in such a way. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's my personal mind becoming more of the mind of the universe and watching that interaction happen. And it doesn't negate my own personal mind. So when I first started researching spirituality long ago in college, the way I understood the translations, because they were all from other cultures, is that your personal self vanishes and is replaced by the universal mind. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's a characteristic of the negative aspect of Eastern spirituality, where they're trying to negate and remove the self and remove the world. And it's a very resistant-based process, and because it vilifies your personal self in that explanation. So for me, it's always been rather, how can I expand to become one with everything, rather than how can I destroy myself and destroy my mind and all of that. That never felt true for me or right for me. It didn't make sense that God would make a mistake. We're not supposed to destroy something that God created. We're supposed to evolve something that God created, because when I look around myself in the universe, that's what everything's wanting to do. And that's what's happening with everything. We're constantly evolving.
Yeah.
So for me, the next evolutionary step, like your book, Homo Spiritus, is becoming more of that unity state of consciousness. And it's not just belief based. It starts with the belief, but as we live the belief, it becomes experiential.
Mm-hmm.
So when you were telling your story about, just thinking that you're one with everything, and then your experience drastically changes and you feel the energy and you notice things, for me, that's the evidence that you're replacing the understanding that the world gave you. So most people walk around in their whole life living the identity of being a physical body. They don't think that they're the physical body, but they're always living according to that idea.
Mm-hmm.
When you introduce the new idea that I'm not the physical body, I'm the all that is, you're replacing the core idea. So you're building the foundation of a brand new experience.
Mm-hmm.
So you're rewriting the story that the world gave you since you were a young child.
Yeah.
And I think that's why then it's so noticeable and so dramatic when, as soon as you step into the idea and embody it, everything starts changing in your entire perceptual field of life.
Mm-hmm.
Because that identity of who I am is really that powerful that it shapes how everything's being perceived.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really beautiful. I'm still working through some beliefs. I
Well,
still
that's the
fall
human
into,
journey. Yeah.
yeah,
As what you said, Bashar said, we're masters of limitation. So
yeah, we
you're
are.
mastering your limitations.
Yeah. And I really I really just have learned to understand, like to accept whatever's going on, there's a benefit for me.
Definitely.
Right? So even if it's the hardest thing, I just had a friend that died of a brain tumor. And it was kind of a really beautiful thing to watch, though, in the way that he handled it. He handled it, but also he was a yogi, and he had such a big community, and he was such a vibrant person that he took us through the whole process. Like he recorded, he was always on, not always, but he would let us know what was going on with his Instagram posts. And you would think, why would anyone create a brain tumor for themselves, right? But the love that he was experiencing from the community was really profound. And he's like, I was on the phone with him once, and he goes, I feel like my heart just like broke wide open, because he was receiving so much love from his community. And again, we're not experiencing, the way we experience time is very linear, and can be drawn out based on your perception. But that's really not what's happening. And I really feel like he manifested that to bring people together, to let them feel love and appreciation for their own lives. And he got to just like really bathe in that energy for a solid year of his life. Like he got to feel everybody's love. It brought his family closer together, his friends closer together, community. I mean, it really was a beautiful, beautiful experience. And we're human beings. So I really feel like, and one thing I realized during that experience, the Kundalini Rising experience, I was actually leaving before I actually exploded into a light being. I was leaving when I could see everything was just a projection. I was waking up on the other side, and I could feel that I was doing that. I could feel like I felt like this was a dream and it was just going away. So, and I've been told, but I never made it quite to the other side, but I've been told that like when you wake up there, you're with everybody else. Everybody we're here with now, we're with up there. So it's not like we wake up there and we're sad that we left, because everybody's there. So I don't know. Anyway, do you have any last thoughts that you want to share?
Yeah, I think, in the modern day world, we have built this idea around death, especially if you're like in spirituality or in health and fitness, that death is a failure. And so we think, oh, what did he do to die? He must have done something wrong to get a brain tumor. But we keep forgetting that death is just the process of transitioning into a new experience. Just like your breath dies at the end of every exhalation, and then you're reborn with a new breath when you inhale. Everything is constantly cycling. We're just leaving behind one experience to move into another experience. So it's beautiful that he can give you a window into his experience and in his process, because that helps to deconstruct all these limited ideas we have about death. When we believe it's something wrong, most people don't want to think about it, don't want to look at it, don't want to hear about it. It makes them very uncomfortable. and they push it away. So I think a great gift is, yeah, bring it up in front of people, because here you are being a yogi in which you're trying to conquer death. You're trying to like conquer the separate self. You're trying to understand what's this eternal, experience all about. Like original yoga was very much about conquering death.
Mm.
And through meditation, you would slow down your body and your breathing to simulate the dying process so you could have, a multidimensional experience. And then you can realize that, we don't die, the body's just a container. So all this effort in traditional yoga to maintain the body and make it flexible so you could sit and channel energy and meditate, like all that focus on the body was just to prepare it to simulate death so that you could then leave the body and come back. So the fact that he let you like witness this process, it's very powerful. And yeah, definitely could understand how a lot of people would feel love because they, have a year essentially to share their gratitude. And once you start sharing gratitude, it feels so good that you're just going to want to share more and more and more of it. So it becomes contagious in a very beneficial way. I think sometimes people pass and, they hide that they're going to die because they're afraid to make others feel uncomfortable. But that also robs their family members and loved ones of opportunities to share their love.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hugely healing and hugely beneficial. I think it's a lot harder when someone dies suddenly and you feel like you could not have expressed yourself than it does where you allow yourself to integrate the process of someone's death gradually unfolding.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
for myself, one of my original teachings I came across from Carlos Castaneda and Don Juan, who it's like his words were the teaching. He talked about making death your advisor. And so how can you consult death like in your own mind even so you can live a fuller life?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people avoid death thinking it's terrifying. But if you actually look at it, it brings so much clarity into how you're living your life. Like what's most important? What do you want to do while you're here?
Yeah.
If it's only temporary, you'll love every moment. You'll embrace every experience more. You'll become fuller experience of the present moment because you want to soak up all the life that you have remaining. So usually what we run away from are some of our greatest teachers. What we're afraid of is actually the greatest gifts that are going to come to us once we learn to embrace them and integrate them.
Yeah, and back to, again, you might check out his stuff. His name is Robert Edward Grant. Mm-hmm. The mathematics of that, really, that 1 over X, like we are X, we're whatever we are, we're like, our being, and then whatever we're not is going to be reflected back until we address it, right? And then we make it whole again, right? So, yeah. So I'm so glad that you brought that up about Don Juan, because is that the name of the book?
It's a Yaqui way of knowledge, the teachings of Don Juan Matus, or just Don Juan. And there's like 9 books in the series.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I remember you said your mom gave you that when you graduated from high school.
Yeah, it was on the bookcase. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was like the first thing, it was the first spiritual book I read, except for the Tao Te Ching. I had read that, but that, that's one of my favorite books. But yeah, the Carlos Castaneda book is what really set me off. That was the first spiritual book I read. And then after that, I read a Zen book to learn how to meditate because Don Juan talked about the importance of stopping internal dialogue. Yet Carlos didn't teach how to do it other than one practice of adjusting the vision of your eyes or just putting people into shocking experiences. You can shut down their internal dialogue if you can shock them.
Because they become really present.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whereas with Zen Buddhism, there was a methodology I could use on my own to cultivate this inner silence. Mm-hmm. So I read Don Juan, and like the same day or the next day, I started reading the Zen book. And then throughout that next year, I read all of Don Juan's books, and I started branching out into some other teachings.
What was the Zen book?
It's called 3 Pillars of Zen by Philip Kapleau. And it's like a monastic manual, as well as looking at different Zen philosophies and understanding historical aspects of the teachings.
Because my daughter is graduating from high school, and I remembered that you had said that about the Don Juan book. And so
yeah, it's very, have you read it?
No.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of hallucinogenic plants and a lot of discussion of non-physical reality And now I liked it especially for the psychological part, because he talks about how we shape our experiences from our understanding.
Mm.
But it began as just a study of hallucinogenic plants because he was an anthropology student at UCLA. And so that was his thesis, was on the use of these medicinal plants. And then that drew him into a deeper study with the shaman. And the focus was actually less on the plants and it was more upon the nature of one's reality.
Mm. In the book, he talks.
In all the books. Yeah, there's like
Okay,
9
good.
books.
Wow.
But the
Okay.
first book is mainly about his different psychedelic experiences with these different plants. So if someone, like for me, I didn't really care about the plants so much. For me, I wanted the understanding of the universe.
Mhm.
And for me, Zen Buddhism or a path of pure meditation was going to get me there. But for someone who doesn't have an interest in it, it can seem, far out or fictional or yeah, or just bizarre.
Yeah.
So, but for me, I wanted the wisdom in it, and I saw that there's a lot of significant wisdom in it, and it didn't make sense that this was just a made up story, or if it was, the purpose of it was to channel some amazing teachings of knowledge.
Mm. Yeah, I think I would like to read it, but I was trying to think of a good gift for my daughter, and I remembered that you had said that. So it's just
Yeah.
that sometimes we resist things coming from our parents.
Yeah, well, like spirituality, when someone's ready, they'll seek it out,
Yeah.
and it'll come into their life in an organic way. And
Mm.
maybe you're part of that process, or maybe it's going to be facilitated a different way. But yeah, if you give a gift from your heart, give something you think your daughter would like, it'll be received well.
Yeah. She's really into psychology, so, or she
Mm.
says she is. So,
Mhm. Yeah,
but
great.
thank you so much, Lincoln. I really
Yeah, you're welcome,
appreciate
Kat.
all your wisdom and everything that you're bringing to the world. I'm not in the inner circle right now, but I'm sure I will be back. I'm just really kind of listening to the mind mastery stuff. And then also I go back to the other, the recordings I have from the other,
Mhm.
but it was really a solid, from 2020 until now, solid 3 years that I was
Yeah, good.
really amazing. So, I mean, I attribute a lot of what I know and my experience now to the work that I've done with you. And so I think
Good.
bottom of my heart,
Yeah. Yeah,
really,
you're very welcome.
because it really allowed me to like have the experience of all of that, which you don't really get with many. It's very hard to find.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. That's been important to me, because information is valuable, but it's really only the first step,
Mhm.
and so this inner circle teachings are really designed to help people apply the knowledge, and the explanations try to make, complex spiritual concepts very easy to understand and very easy to apply through like action, whether it's learning how to create your emotions consciously or learning the process of the psyche to make decisions or learning how to meditate and things like that.
Yeah. Hey,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.